Chapter 25:14. The formation rumbled as restriction runes surged out like a tidal wave, covering the entire area. 9. Nether entrapment. The One Clan's martial emperors felt as if they'd fallen into an icy pit. If their young master were to be harmed, even Granny Snow wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. As for the retainers, they were destined to pay with their lives. What shocked them the most was that when the formation appeared, they clearly saw another Lin Sun appear and charge into the depths of the whirlpool in a flash. Another clone. The series of events nearly drove the martial emperors insane. While they were distracted, Lin Sun killed another 8th-level martial emperor. The splattering blood caused the other martial emperors to widen their eyes. They didn't dare to think anymore and fought with all their might. At this moment, the worries in Mi Wuya and Yin Yuro's hearts were greatly reduced after the shock. The way they looked at Lin Sun had also changed. After so many years, they didn't dare to imagine how Lin Sun's battle prowess had become so terrifying. Thinking back to when they were on the starry ancient path, they were of the same level and generation. Now that time had passed, they were no longer people of the same world. At the same time, in the giant whirlpool, as soon as Lin Sun's figure entered, a thick golden sword slashed towards him, sweeping up boundless light and releasing a terrifying aura of destruction. Clang! The abyssal sword cauldron appeared in front of Lin Sun, blocking the sword and bursting with dazzling divine radiance. Lin Sun's figure swayed slightly. Opposite him, a figure also swayed and couldn't help but frown. Ling Xuanzi, you're really courting death. This person was none other than the Imperial Wind Sword Emperor, Wen Shaoheng. He was at the peak of the 7th level of the Great Perfection Emperor realm. When he was refining the Great Tao ancestral root, he immediately sensed the commotion outside the giant whirlpool. He didn't pay it much attention at first, confident that Granny Snow and the others could withstand any danger. Who would have thought that as the series of events happened, Wen Shaoheng couldn't remain calm? He immediately gave up on refining the Great Tao ancestral root and hid at the entrance of the giant whirlpool. At this moment, as his voice fell, boom! The golden sword flashed up and flowed with strands of an eternal aura. As it slashed out, it was like the sword of the eternal celestial emperor that slashed down towards the world, and it emanated the might to obliterate the world. A transcendent aura circulated around his body. A rain of light sprinkled down, and the space between his brows was filled with a murderous aura. It was as if he possessed a spirit that could devour mountains and rivers, and a strength that was peerless and divine. With just a single sword strike, he had displayed a terrifying battle prowess that far exceeded his peers. However, Lin Sun didn't hold back at all. The abyssal sword cauldron roared and fought head-on, because he was very clearly aware that he absolutely couldn't waste even the slightest bit of time in the current situation, and he had to act swiftly and swiftly. Just like before, he released his doppelgangers to lure Granny Shui and the black-robed man away. Then, he fought the One Clan's great emperors head-on. It was nothing more than to fight for an opportunity to set up a formation. Now that the 9th Hell God Confinement Formation had been formed, all that remained was to deal with Wen Shaoheng. Dang! 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 Earth-shattering collisions resounded as the golden sword clashed with the abyssal sword cauldron. In the blink of an eye, they had already exchanged dozens of blows. The battle had just begun, but it was already dangerous and intense. What surprised Lin Sun was that Wen Shaoheng was extremely powerful. He was far more powerful than the average peerless martial artist, and he had a strong foundation. Lin Sun's attacks were all neutralized. This was the first time Lin Sun had encountered such a powerful opponent over the years. Even a 9th Realm Great Ancestor was slightly inferior to Wen Shaoheng. At the same time, Wen Shaoheng's heart couldn't calm down. He was regarded as a young master and listed in the One Clan's 5 Ultimate Emperors because he was a rare genius that only appeared once in 10,000 years. His cultivation had been tempered to become extremely strong. In the 8,000 years since he started cultivating, he had a place of his own in the eternal true world. His name had spread far and wide, and he had been praised by many immortal figures. But when Xiaoheng had never expected that a sixth-tier great emperor from the ancient path of stars could cross a realm and fight him head-on. This was too unbelievable. If such a character had appeared in the eternal true world, it would have been understandable. At the very least, based on what Wen Xiaoheng knew, there were some immortal emperors who could not be measured with common sense among them who brought out the power of heavenly order. But Wen Xiaoheng found it hard to accept that such a person had appeared in a remote and declining universe like the ancient path of stars. Kill! His long hair fluttered in the wind, and his handsome face was filled with killing intent. His aura was like a raging storm, and he released all of his cultivation. He absolutely could not allow this to continue. Otherwise, if news of this spread, the Wen clan's reputation would be tarnished. After all, he was born in the Wen clan. Ever since he was born, he had enjoyed the best cultivation resources, practiced the best cultivation methods, and had many old antiques by his side to guide him. If he couldn't even take down a person who walked out of the ancient path of stars, he would be too useless. Struggling is futile. Lin Sun's expression was indifferent. He was neither sad nor happy. Only the aura around him grew stronger and stronger, as if it was going to rise steadily. Every time the abyssal sword cauldron swept out, it produced an unparalleled suppressive force. No matter how Wen Xiaoheng struggled, his attacks were destroyed one by one. Soon, amidst the sounds of explosions and collisions, Wen Xiaoheng was suppressed to the point of retreating. His handsome face turned livid. He found it hard to believe, and his heart was filled with rage. But every time Lin Sun attacked, it was like a natural moat pressing down on him. Every time he tried to dispel it, his qi and blood would surge, his internal organs would be shaken, and his body would feel a stabbing pain. It became strenuous for him to resist. How is this possible? How is this possible? When Xiaoheng roared in his heart, his eyes were filled with madness and violence. Suddenly, he waved his hand. Buzz! A strange gray shuttle-shaped talisman shot out. Lin Sun's pupils shrank, and he immediately put the abyssal sword cauldron in front of him. Boom! In an instant, he felt a terrifying and irresistible force collide with the abyssal sword cauldron. He couldn't help but stagger back, and the qi and blood in his body surged. The abyssal sword cauldron shook violently and buzzed. Even the silent spirit talisman can be blocked. In the distance, Wen Xiaoheng was even more stunned. He almost couldn't believe his eyes. This was his trump card. It was personally refined by an immortal figure. The talisman was branded with the breath of immortality. Its power was so terrifying that it could easily kill a ninth realm ancestor. But now, it was blocked by Lin Sun. This is your trump card. Lin Sun's black eyes flashed with strong, killing intent. Swish! His figure turned illusory, and the remaining two Tao bodies rushed out together. One was using the Tower of Endless, which was sprinkling billions of brilliant light. The other was using the Broken Blade, which was emitting a monstrous, murderous aura. Together with the original body, they rushed towards Wen Xiaoheng. Wen Xiaoheng was weak. Lin Sun alone had already suppressed him to the point that he couldn't even lift his head. Now, there were two more. How could he fight? In just a moment, Wen Xiaoheng was seriously injured. His body was scorched, and he kept coughing up blood. If it wasn't for the mysterious green armor he wore, which helped him resolve most of the attacks, he probably wouldn't have been able to hold on. Ling Xuanzi, just you wait. When Xiaoheng let out a roar, he suddenly crushed a silver talisman, and a magical formation was instantly covered by a dark blue light. Boom! His figure flashed, and he actually tore a hole in the giant whirlpool and rushed out. How could Lin Sun let him escape? He immediately rushed out. Outside the giant whirlpool, the Tao pattern restriction formation rumbled. Little Five, who was sitting inside, immediately activated the power of the formation. Therefore, as soon as Wen Xiaoheng rushed out, he was directly suppressed by the layers of Tao pattern restriction formation. He staggered and almost fell to the ground. If it wasn't for the dark blue Taoist light that enveloped his body and helped him neutralize the terrifying pressure, he would have been completely suppressed and wouldn't have been able to struggle. This damn thing. When Xiaoheng's face turned ugly. he completely realized that something was wrong. Boom! Without giving Wen Xiaoheng a chance to breathe, Lin Sun and his clone had already rushed over. The abyssal sword cauldron, the tower of endless, and the broken blade attacked at the same time. Wen Xiaoheng's soul almost came out of his body, and he let out a furious roar. Open! A white jade pendant hanging on his neck suddenly glowed, and a mighty and boundless illusory figure emerged. The figure was like an immortal god, and as soon as it appeared, it swung its fist. Rumble, the formation rumbled, and the world seemed to be turned upside down. Lin Sun's treasures and Dao were all pushed back by this punch. This made Lin Sun's eyes narrow, and he immediately judged that this was probably the will of an immortal figure. The aura it revealed was too powerful. Open! When Xiaoheng roared, the majestic illusory figure formed a seal with both hands, and an indescribably terrifying aura gathered at this moment. Lin Sun's expression immediately changed, and he let out a roar. Little 5, retreat. Xiao didn't hesitate to fly out at the first possible moment. Boom! An earth-shaking roar resounded, and the 9th nether god, trapping formation, exploded. Countless light torrents splashed out, and it swept out. That kind of power made the floating land under his feet shake violently. Even though Lin Sun had resisted with all his strength and pushed his strength to the extreme, he was still shaken and flew out. A trace of blood flowed out of his lips, and his face turned slightly pale. Looking at the battlefield again, the majestic figure had long disappeared, and even Wen Xiaoheng could not be found. Obviously, after breaking the formation, Wen Xiaoheng did not dare to hesitate at all, and chose to escape immediately. Lin Sun's eyebrows were clouded. Wen Xiaoheng's combat power was indeed strong, and Fang Xuanjun from the Daheng Sword House could not compare with him. But for Lin Sun, Wen Xiaoheng was not a big threat. The only thing he did not expect was that Wen Xiaoheng had more than 1 or 2 trump cards. If not, Wen Xiaoheng would not have been able to escape today. But thinking about it, how could Wen Xiaoheng, a great emperor from the immortal emperor family, have less trump cards to save his life? Just as Lin Sun's expression was uncertain, smoke and dust dispersed, and the doppelganger that had been fighting with the One family's great emperor realm swept over from afar. Literature Hall, Chapter 2515. Through the memories of his doppelganger, Lin Sun learned that the group of emperors from the One family had all been killed. Only Mi Wuya and Yin Yuro were captured alive. The reason why they were captured alive was simple. Mi Wuya and Yin Yuro seemed to be worried about something and deliberately let Lin Sun's doppelganger do it. Now, both of them were in the treasure of Lin Sun's doppelganger. Lin Sun was in no hurry to ask about their situation. He was waiting. Soon, the doppelganger that went to kill the black-robed man and the silver-robed woman returned. Lin Sun immediately learned that the black-robed man had been killed and the silver-robed woman, Yin Huang, escaped with a strange secret method. However, she was also seriously injured and would not be able to recover in a short time. Lin Sun was not surprised by this. The black-robed man and the silver-robed woman were both 9th realm ancestors. Although they were not as strong as Granny Snow, it would be difficult to kill both of them in a 1-on-2 situation. After the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, the doppelganger that was fighting with Granny Snow finally returned. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed in an instant. The doppelganger was injured. Lin Sun sensed it and immediately understood the specific situation. Although Granny Snow was not a Dao ancestor, she was not far from it. She even held a law bell imprinted with a mortal aura. The sound of the bell spread, oppressing people's spirit and state of mind. An ordinary emperor would have been shattered by the sound of the bell. Although the doppelganger was not trapped by the bell in the battle, it was greatly impacted and suppressed, so much so that it suffered a lot in the battle. Most importantly, the abyssal sword cauldron, the tower of endless, and other treasures were in Lin Sun's hands, so none of the doppelganger's treasures could compete with the bell. After understanding this, Lin Sun put away the doppelganger and ordered Little 5. Whoosh! Little 5's figure flashed over. In the previous battle, he had dodged in time and was not affected. set up the Tao-falling death sword here. No matter who invades, kill without mercy. After saying this, Lin Sun walked into the stagnant, huge whirlpool. It was incredible. The battle from before had been intense and terrifying, but whether it was the floating land beneath their feet or the giant vortex, neither of them had been damaged. However, it was obvious when he thought about it. In the countless years of the past, countless extraordinary figures had fought and killed in the Spectre Soul domain. Yet this expanse of the universe hadn't been destroyed. Not long after Lin entered the huge whirlpool, buzz, countless rune diagrams surged, covering the sky and covering the earth. Unlike the 9 nether god trapping technique, the might of the Tao falling heaven-slaying technique was enough to kill a 9th realm ancestor. Little Five sat there with a solemn expression. At the same time, that guy actually dared to kill Wen Xiaoheng of the One family. In the starry sky far away from the floating continent, Xing Mutian and the others witnessed everything that had happened. They couldn't help but be shocked. I'm not trying to kill him, but have you ever thought that among all the emperors who entered the gate of the earth and earth realm with us, who would have thought that Ling Xuanzi's battle prowess would be so abnormal? Someone had a solemn expression. No wonder he dared to openly offend Wen Xiaoheng and the others on the extradition Dao platform. It turns out that he has something to rely on, but if he does that, he will have completely offended the Wen family. Can he bear the consequences? The crowd discussed. Only Xing Mutian let out a long sigh. His expression was complicated. When it comes to battle prowess, I can't compare to him. When it comes to courage, I can't even compare. His words made everyone around him look at each other. We all think that we will have to bear unimaginable consequences if we offend the Wen family. Has Ling Xuanzi not thought about it? Even under such circumstances, he still dared to do such a thing. It doesn't matter whether he has something to rely on or not. His courage is not something an ordinary great emperor can compare to. Xing Mutian let out a long sigh. What's more, so what if we offend the Wen family? The eternal true world is vast, and there are many immortal emperor clans there. If we really enter the eternal true world in the future, do we have to worry about offending those immortal emperor clans? Do we have to be afraid of them? How preposterous! He seemed to have understood something, and a fierce look appeared in his eyes. The great 1,000 battle domain is a path of no return. We don't even know if we can survive. If that's the case, why should we be afraid of those immortal emperor clans? In the future, no matter who they are, we won't retreat. Once he finished speaking, Xing Mutian turned around and left. Lin Sun's battle had shocked him too much. He had also come to a sudden realization and broken the shackles in his heart. Around the floating continent, there were many people who had witnessed the battle like Xing Mutian and his party. All of them were shocked, and their hearts were in turmoil. They could not calm down. However, there were only a few people who could be moved like Xing Mutian and change their state of mind. Most of them were wary of Lin Sun. They saw Lin Sun as a great enemy. Some people laughed coldly and gloated. They thought that Lin Sun's actions were no different from drawing fire to himself. He would have to bear unimaginable consequences. There were also people who were eager to make a move, and they glared at Lin Sun. When Xiaoheng and his party had already been defeated, and only Lin Sun was left on the floating continent, enjoying the Great Way ancestral route alone. This was undoubtedly the best time for him to take advantage of the situation. But even so, they had to weigh the consequences of fighting for the Great Way ancestral route. After all, the combat power Lin Sun had displayed was too terrifying. In short, these emperors who had yet to leave had their own thoughts. But no matter what, Lin Sun's name was firmly etched in their minds. The news spread, and soon, the emperors in various places in the undead soul realm learned about the bloody battle. For a time, there was a lot of discussion and uproar. I didn't know that this guy was a wolf in sheep's clothing. The Jade Star Absolute Emperor was stunned when he heard the news. She had once intervened in a confrontation against Lin Sun in the ancient nightmare battlefield. One reason was to snatch the Origin Orb, and the other was to do Lin Sun a favor. After all, they were fellow travelers who had entered the gate of the Earth Kuan realm together. But now, The Jade Star Absolute Emperor realized that he had underestimated Ling Xuanzi's strength. Great! That's what a man should do. Ning Daoji was stunned when he heard the news. After a long time, he let out a hearty laugh. Since ancient times, the cultivators of the eternal true world have always acted high and mighty, even if they are weaker than us. But who dares to deal a heavy blow like Ling Xuanzi did? After hearing the news, the reckless scholar emperor exclaimed in admiration. Fang Xuanjin and the others from the Dahingsor house have yet to appear. Could it be that they've already been killed by Ling Xuanzi? There were also people who made bold guesses. All the experts who entered through the Earth-Kuan realm gate, it was clear that Lin Sun not only had a falling out with Wen Xiaoheng and his men, but also had a grudge against Fang Xuanjin and his men. But up until now, Fang Xuanjin's group still hadn't revealed themselves. This caused others to be unable to help, but wonder if they'd suffered misfortune. At the same time, on a barren, floating continent, I must kill this Ling Xuanzi. When Xiaoheng's hair was disheveled, his face was ashen, and his aura was terrifying. Young master, please calm down. If we set off now, we will reach the first immortal emperor city in the Great Thousand Battle Domain in less than 3 months. Granny Shua's expression was extremely grim. She gritted her teeth and said, during these 3,000 years, the ones guarding this city are the Hung clan that has a deep relationship with our own clan. At that time, we can borrow the Hung clan's strength to kill this brat. Borrow the Hung clan's strength? When Xiaoheng felt a strong sense of humiliation in his heart. Since when did he, when Xiaoheng, have to resort to external help? Young master, don't let your emotions affect your decisions. For a descendant of the heavens like yourself, besides your own cultivation and treasures, your own identity, status, and connections are also part of your strength. Granny Shui consoled. Why do the experts of the Great Thousand World revere you so much? Apart from being afraid of your cultivation, they are even more afraid of your identity and the connections you have. This is your advantage, and also the power that our Wen clan has possessed since ancient times. Young master, you were born extraordinary, so why don't you use it? Her words made Wen Xiaoheng fall into silence, and he only spoke after a long time. Did the others suffer? Granny Shui flipped her hand and took out a black jade book that was branded with an obscure aura. She sized it up and couldn't help but frown. The 2 slaves that were imprisoned by young master are still alive. When Xiaoheng was stunned, only the 2 of them are left? Granny Shui nodded. Strange, why did Ling Xuanzi spare their lives? Is it just because they came from the starry ancient path? When Xiaoheng said in annoyance, what's the point of saying that? They're just 2 slaves. So what if they're saved? Their fate souls have already been planted with the power of the curse of 10,000 extinction. If they think that they can escape from my control just like that, then they're gravely mistaken. Granny Shui's eyes flickered, and she came up with a plan. Young master, if they're still alive, they'll be of some use to us. At the very least, when we want to take revenge in the future, we can use their auras to locate Ling Xuanzi. When Xiaoheng frowned, what if they're not with Ling Xuanzi? Granny Shui smiled sinisterly. That's simple. Swish. She swiped her palm across the black jade book and found 2 strange, twisted symbols, which represented the power of Mi Wuya and Yin Yuro's curse. Then, rays of light appeared on Granny Shui's fingertips, and she pressed them on the 2 strange symbols. A moment later, Granny Shui put away the black jade book and said, Young master, I've already ordered them to follow Ling Xuanzi no matter what. If they dare to disobey, I'll activate the power of the curse of 10,000 extinction and kill them. When Xiaoheng nodded, then suddenly said, I just don't know if Ling Xuanzi is that Lin's son. If he really is Lin's son, then capturing him alive is more useful to me. Granny Shui's eyes flashed with a strange light, and she laughed softly. That's not difficult. When we capture him, we'll definitely be able to see through his identity. All right, let's do that, Wen Xiaoheng said decisively. Chapter 25:16. In the huge whirlpool, Lin Sun was conversing with Mi Wuya and Yin Yuro, who had just woken up. Lin Sun quickly resolved some of his doubts. It turned out that when Heavenly Emperor Shi was killed, Mi Wuya and Yin Yuro had traveled through the galaxy together, intending to seek the path to the other shore. Their journey was quite similar to Lin Sun's. They had experienced many dangers along the way, and had passed through collapsed and dried-up universes. They had also entered some extremely prosperous universes, where they were inevitably seen as prey and hunted down. Although the two of them were peerless figures who stood at the pinnacle of the starry sky ancient path, they were still not strong enough to face off against martial emperors with higher cultivation levels. As a result, the two were unfortunately captured alive by a Realm 9 ancestor after entering a certain galaxy. The two of them had originally thought that they would suffer a calamity, but who would have thought that after learning of their origins, the Ninth Realm ancestor would imprison them and treat them as slaves before selling them to Wen Xiaoheng. Wen Xiaoheng did not kill them. Instead, he planted a strange forbidden curse in their souls and took complete control of them. Later, the two found out that any emperor who walked out of the ancient path of stars and headed to the other shore had a bounty on their heads. Any captured person could be exchanged for 100,000 first-class Eternity Source crystals. 10,000 first-class Eternity Source crystals was enough to tempt any emperor. 100,000 was enough to make any Realm 9 ancestor jealous and drool. Therefore, all the universes along the way had their eyes on the emperors who crossed the ancient path of stars. This was also why Lin Sun and the other emperors of the ancient path of stars were constantly besieged along the way. Lin Sun, for example, had been intercepted countless times. Who issued the bounty? Lin Sun could not help but ask. 100,000 first-class Eternity Source crystals in exchange for an emperor of the ancient path of stars. This was a huge sum. Ordinary forces could not afford it. The Permitha Luo clan. Mi Wuya gave an answer that was both unexpected and reasonable to Lin Sun, because only the Permitha Luo clan, who had controlled the ancient path of stars with the forbidden power of order for countless years, could do such a crazy thing. Then do you know why the Luo clan is doing this? Lin Sun pondered. This must be the Luo clan's revenge on the starry sky ancient path. Mi Wuya's expression was gloomy. Venerable D Nameless is dead, and so is Heavenly Emperor Shi. How can the Permitha Luo clan not be furious? Beside him, Misty Rain also nodded, agreeing with this conjecture. Lin Sun thought to himself, these two were not the only ones who died. There was also the purple-robed woman, Yin Xing, the seventh elder of Luo family, Luo Xingfeng, and a great emperor named Luo Chun. This was especially so for Luo Chun, who was seen as one of the most dazzling martial emperors among the younger generation of the Luo clan. He was extremely talented and had an unparalleled foundation. He was born to cultivate. It was said that this person had awakened the Luo family's top bloodline latent ability, Star Fire Spirit Spiral. He had only cultivated for less than 800 years, but he was already a 4th-level Ju Ing martial emperor. This was much faster than Wen Xiaoheng, who had cultivated for 8,000 years and was a 7th-stage Ju Di realm martial emperor. But this Luo Chun had long been killed by Lin Sun in the immortal Phoenix realm. By then, Lin Sun had already gained some understanding of the situation in Eternal True World. Through comparing himself to Wen Xiaoheng, he could deduce one thing. Luo Chen's death must have infuriated the entire Luo family. There was also Luo Xingfeng, Nameless Emperor, Shi Tiandi, Zi, and the female Star Yin. All of them were important figures in the Luo family, but all of them had met with misfortune on the starry ancient path. How could the Luo family not go crazy? From this, it could be deduced why they would issue such a bounty for martial emperors on the starry ancient path. However, Lin Sun had a vague feeling that this was only one of the reasons. The Luo family probably had another purpose for doing so. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun asked, what kind of status does Wen Xiaoheng have? Why does he care about the Luo family's bounty? Speaking of this matter, Mi Wuya looked at Lin Sun with a complicated expression. Speaking of which, this matter should have something to do with Brother Lin. Me? Lin Sun was stunned. Beside him, Yin said softly, "This one Xiaoheng has always been in love with a woman from the Luo family, called Luo Ling. It is said that the bounty issued by the Luo family this time came from Luo Ling, perhaps to curry favor with Luo Ling, when Xiaoheng found out from somewhere that Brother Lin is the first peerless figure to become a martial emperor on the starry ancient path in the last 100,000 years. So, he has been trying to capture Brother Lin and give him to Luo Ling as a gift. For this, when Xiaoheng even sent many people to cross the void and head to the starry ancient path. But after searching for a long time, they did not find any trace of Brother Lin. Hearing this, Lin Sun could not help but raise his eyebrows. Just to curry favor with a woman, when Xiaoheng is so unscrupulous? This seemed very absurd. It is said that Luo Ling is a legend of the Luo family. She was born with a 9 ultimate divine body, and her talent and cultivation far surpass that of others. Coupled with her outstanding appearance, temperament, and charm, she is also very famous in the eternal true world and is worshipped as a celestial fairy. Yin said, when Xiaoheng once casually said that in order to pursue a fairy like Luo Ling, he naturally has to be creative in order to capture the heart of a beauty. Lin Sun sneered with a deep look in his eyes. In order to pursue a woman, he wanted to capture him and offer him to Luo Ling. This one Xiaoheng was too arrogant. At that moment, he finally understood why Mi Wuya and Yin Yu had been left by Wen Xiaoheng's side. Perhaps it was precisely because they had failed to capture him that Mi Wuya and Yin Yu were treated as prey that Wen Xiaoheng was about to offer to Luo Ling. What do the two of you plan to do next? Lin Sun asked. Mi Wuya's expression was gloomy. We can't control our own fate. What else can we do? Yin Yu's expression also became gloomy. Just like Mi Wuya, her life's soul had been planted with the forbidden spell of 10,000 despair. Even if Wen Xiaoheng had saved her, she was destined to be unable to escape from Wen Xiaoheng's control. This was also why they had not dared to communicate with Lin Sun through voice transmission from the moment they met in the guide city until the moment they were rescued. With Wen Xiaoheng around, the moment they transmitted their voices, they would be detected immediately. After understanding this, killing intent flashed in Lin Sun's eyes. He said, "It's a pity that I let that guy escape this time. Otherwise, I would have definitely been able to remove the forbidden spell from them." Right at that moment, Mi Wuya and Yin Yu suddenly let out muffled groans in unison as if they were in pain. Soon after, their expressions changed and became uncertain, as if they had encountered an extremely difficult problem. "What's wrong?" Lin Sun asked. Mi Wuya and Yin Yu looked at each other. They were struggling in their hearts and appeared extremely hesitant. After a long time, Mi Wuya finally came to a decision. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "Previously, Miss Euro and I received a clear order from Wen Xiaoheng to follow Brother Lin no matter what. Otherwise, we will definitely die." Yin Yu also felt bitter. She nodded and said, "According to my speculation, Wen Xiaoheng probably did this to locate Brother Lin based on our tracks. This way, if he wants to take revenge on Brother Lin, he will definitely be able to find Brother Lin immediately." Lin Sun suddenly understood and smiled. "If that's the case, it's actually a good thing. I can't wait for him to come and throw away his life." Then, he asked curiously, "Then can you sense Wen Xiaoheng's location?" Mi Wuya and Yin Yu shook their heads. Lin Sun pondered for a moment and said, "Forget it. You don't have to worry about this matter. From now on, you just need to follow me. When Wen Xiaoheng comes looking for you, I will naturally deal with him and remove the shackles on you." Mi Wuya and Yin Yu were stunned. They looked ashamed and embarrassed. After all, they had been enemies on the ancient path of the stars and fought in the forbidden ancient immortal zone. But now, Lin Sun was standing up for them regardless of a risk. How could they not feel ashamed, not touched? What happened in the past is ultimately a conflict of youth. Our standpoints are different, so there is no right or wrong in what we do. Lin Sun smiled and comforted the two. Only then did they feel a little more at ease. Next, Mi Wuya and Yin Yu walked out of the giant vortex and stood guard in the Fallen Dao formation with Little Five. Lin Sun did not waste any more time and arrived at the end of the giant vortex. It was dazzling, resplendent, and suffused with the miraculous radiance of the Grand Tao. If one looked carefully, it was surprisingly a Grand Tao ancestral root. Regardless of its size or appearance, it far surpassed the Grand Tao ancestral root that Lin Sun had refined earlier, and it could be said to be shocking. Moreover, the Grand Tao ancestral root was covered in an alms bowl. It was suffused with a bronze color and emanated an indestructible aura. There is no need to guess to know that this treasure came from Wen Shaoing. The reason it was placed on the Grand Tao ancestral root was clearly because he was worried that the Grand Tao ancestral root would be affected by the battle. But now it had benefited Lin Sun. Lin Sun flicked his sleeve and put away the bronze alms bowl. It was a mid-rank spirit grade emperor artifact, and it far exceeded ordinary treasures. It was of extraordinary value. However, Lin Sun didn't even spare it a glance before putting it away casually. Such a treasure wasn't very useful to him. After thinking for a moment, Lin Sun released all his 5 Tao forms and sat cross-legged at the side of the Grand Tao ancestral root with his main body before starting to meditate. In next to no time, the surging and resplendent rain of the Grand Tao completely drowned Lin Sun and his clones. Time flowed by bit by bit. The floating continent was deathly silent, but there were still many figures in the shadows that hadn't left. Swoosh! After a long time, a figure was finally unable to restrain himself, and he suddenly teleported through space and charged out explosively to arrive in the sky above the floating continent. However, he was very cautious and didn't approach it. He withdrew a bright, flaming flying sword and slashed it towards the grand formation that enveloped the enormous vortex. Bang! The grand formation shook while an imperceptible rift appeared on it. Even though it quickly closed up, it still allowed that figure to instantly feel much more at ease. He gritted his teeth and charged over explosively. At the same time, numerous Emperor Realm figures that were scattered in the shadows were eager to make a move, and they paid close attention to all of this. It seemed like so long as they had the slightest chance, then they would attack ferociously. Author's note: I'll break out tomorrow. Literature Library. Chapter 2517. The bright flaming flying sword swept up, as if it was dragging a heavenly river of flames, and slashed down across the sky. The formation rumbled and a crack appeared. That figure was obviously a 9th realm ancestor. When he saw the opportunity, he immediately teleported and rushed into the formation. Let's go too. In the shadows, the experts that had been accumulating strength since a long time ago charged out without the slightest hesitation at this moment, and they wanted to seize this opportunity to fight. However, as soon as they arrived on the floating continent, a furious roar suddenly resounded. Damn it, you cheated! That one sentence caused the expressions of the figures who had rushed to the floating land to change. Cheated? Then, the Tao Fall Heavenly Death formation was activated. The Tao pattern formation flickered and rolled, covering the sky as if it was going to refine the world. No! The Realm 9 ancestor let out a shrill scream. However, in the blink of an eye, it stopped abruptly and became completely silent. Only the Tao Fall Heavenly Death formation rumbled and lit up the starry sky. Retreat! Those figures that were charging over felt a chill run down their spines, and their faces turned pale with astonishment. They chose to retreat at the first possible moment. Even a Realm 9 ancestor had been killed. One could imagine how terrifying the formation was. For a time, the floating land became quiet again. It was like a silent dragon's lair, and no one dared to approach. In the formation, Little Five felt his heart ache. Under his control, he had purposely revealed some flaws in the Tao Fall Heavenly Death formation to lure the Realm 9 ancestor into the trap and kill him in one go. However, in just a moment, the Tao Fall Heavenly Death formation had used up 3,000 Grade 1 Eternity Source Crystals. However, after checking the Realm 9 ancestor's belongings, Little Five beamed and thought to himself, Lin Sun will definitely not scold me this time. These belongings, treasures, divine materials, and other divine materials were worth far more than 3,000 Grade 1 Eternity Source crystals. Apart from that, the Realm 9 ancestor had more than 5,000 Grade 1 Eternity Source crystals on him. I wonder if anyone will dare to come and test me. Little 5 stroked his chin and fell in a deep thought. Miwia and Yin Yuro, who were also overseeing the formation, could not help but be shocked speechless. Kill the ancestor. With this powerful formation alone, Lin Sun could walk on the ancient starry sky path unhindered. Even in the great 1,000 battle domains, it was a trump card that could intimidate everyone. It was a daunting sight. What made Little 5 feel regretful was that no one else came to take the risk in the following period of time. Clearly, they were all frightened. 6 hours later, within the enormous whirlpool, Lin Sun had completely refined the ancestral root of the Great Tao. His cultivation rose explosively, and he stepped into the perfection stage of the 6th level Emperor realm. Awesome! Lin Sun's black eyes were bright and deep with joy. He had only been in the Spectre Soul realm for a few days, but his cultivation had already improved by leaps and bounds. If he had been in the outside world, he would have needed many years of hard work to achieve this. My cultivation has already attained perfection. Now, it's impossible for my cultivation to improve no matter how many Grand Tao ancestral roots I refine. Soon, Lin Sun realized that if he wanted to make progress in his cultivation, he had to break through the realm. Unfortunately, breaking through the realm wasn't something that could be achieved by hard work, but an opportunity. The 7th level of the Emperor realm was known as the Void Refinement realm. My heart is as bright as the moon. I and the universe are both the outside and the inside, refining the void into reality. In the vast starry sky outside the Emperor's realm, this was a Taoist hymn that described the Void Refinement realm. It said that when a cultivator reached this realm, he would condense thousands of Taos in the Emperor's realm and open up a starry sky. The sun and moon would shine brightly in it, and the great Tao that fell from it would form a clear and turbid harmony with the Emperor's realm. As long as a cultivator reached this realm, his cultivation would be shrouded in divine light, and his Dharma form would be perfected. Both the form and the spirit would be wonderful, and the void would be complete, returning emptiness to reality. In fact, it was a process of transforming one's cultivation from being to nothingness. Nothingness was nothingness. Only by cultivating nothingness could one return to reality. To put it simply, it was to return emptiness to reality. This was the Void Refinement realm. One had already begun to touch the mysteries of the Great Tao between emptiness and reality, existence and nothingness, and reality and emptiness. The 7th level of the Void Refinement realm, the 8th level of the Unification realm, the 9th level of the Ancestral root. I wonder what kind of mysteries can be comprehended in creating life and death between existence and nothingness. Lin Sun was lost in thought. A long time ago, when he broke through the 8th level of Green Cloud Path, Tao breaking, he comprehended a forbidden realm. The Great Tao was the origin of the world. The ultimate pursuit of the cultivators was hidden in the mysteries of the world's operation. If there was a universe in one's heart, one could control it. One day, if one could build a world by one's own strength, deduce the order of the cycle, and change all things, what was the difference between him and the supreme creator in the legend? The power mastered in this realm was not to turn the rotten into the magical, but to create and destroy, to create life and death between existence and nothingness. This was the so-called making something out of nothing. In the past, Lin Sun didn't know that even in the Emperor realm, very few people could reach this realm. But now, after many years of travel, with the gradual improvement of cultivation, Lin Sun had faintly realized that this realm was indeed a taboo. At least the ancestors of the 9 realms didn't have such power. No wonder she was so uneasy when she knew this. Lin Sun thought of the past. In Shi's understanding, making something out of nothing and creating life and death between existence and nothingness was like a taboo. But Lin Sun didn't understand this at all. Similarly, in the mulberry forest, the young man with golden cicada, also lost his composure when he learned that Lin Sun had seen the realm of making something out of nothing before he became a saint. Lin Sun clearly remembered that the young man with golden cicada was stunned at that time. He looked up at Lin Sun and asked, "Do you also know this realm?" Lin Sun's answer was just a glimpse. Even so, the young man with golden cicada was still full of praise. Now, Lin Sun had long known that the young man with golden cicada had the reputation of, although the cicada was small, the Tao was higher than the sky. In the game of chess that year, the golden cicada showed a terrifying and boundless power and killed the ancestors of the emperors like raindrops. Ruosu, the third senior sister, was extremely amazed. But a long time ago, the young man with golden cicada was surprised by Lin Sun's making something out of nothing. It could be imagined how wonderful the realm of making something out of nothing was. Now, when Lin Sun returned to the past, and many details and pictures that he didn't care about emerged in his mind, he realized that the realm of making something out of nothing was not simple. It was indeed like a taboo. At least, Lin Sun had killed many emperors over the years, but he had never seen one with such a Taoan inline character. Maybe only when I reach the 7th, 8th, or 9th realm, I can uncover some mysteries of making something out of nothing. Lin Sun came to a sudden realization. The 7th level of void training, the 8th level of Tao reunion, and the 9th level of ancestor returning were actually a realm to improve cultivation between reality and nothingness. After a long time, Lin Sun got rid of distractions and said, "Green Sparrow, I'm going to leave the realm of the dead." In order to break through the realm? Green Sparrow asked. Obviously, she also noticed that Lin Sun's cultivation had reached the peak of the 6th level and needed to break through the realm to improve his strength. Lin Sun nodded yes. Green Sparrow said without hesitation, "In the deepest part of the realm of the dead, there is a tunnel of wreckage. It is said that it is paved with the corpses of the most powerful figures of the last era. If you step on this path, you can enter the next battlefield, the Sunluo underworld." Then, Green Sparrow introduced the Sunluo underworld. The Sunluo underworld was huge and full of treachery. It was said that it was originally part of the Ghost Nether region in the last era. But with the destruction of the last era, the Sunluo underworld had already collapsed. Now, that place had already turned into a place of great danger. Soldiers, generals, and kings of hell appeared all year round. Even the weakest soldier of hell could kill an expert within the 3rd level of the Emperor realm. And a character at the level of hell could threaten a cultivator below the 7th level of the Emperor realm. As for the kings of hell, they were the most terrifying. Some powerful kings of hell could even kill ancestors of the 9th realm. There are no fortuitous encounters or serendipities in Dark Abyss lands, but if you kill the ferocious creatures in the Abyss lands, you will have a chance to obtain Underworld Pearls. These pearls have unbelievable effects when it comes to refining Emperor weapons. In the Eternal True World, an Abyss King level Underworld Pearl can be sold for 300,000 Eternal Void Origin Crystals. Green Sparrow spoke frankly with assurance. Of course, very few people would sell such a treasure. After all, it is not easy to collect such a treasure. Lin Sun was a little tempted when he heard this. Although his cultivation was improving by leaps and bounds, the power of the Abyssal Sword Cauldron was increasing at an extremely slow pace. If he could obtain a divine item like the Underworld Pearl, it might be able to increase the speed of the Abyssal Sword Cauldron's advancement. Without any delay, Lin Sun got up and walked out of the huge vortex. On that day, Lin Sun brought Mi Wuya and Yinyu with him and rushed towards the deepest part of the realm of the dead. Along the way, he saw many battles, all of which had arisen because of the fight for the Great Path ancestral route. Lin Sun was no longer interested in participating in those battles. He hurriedly left like a passerby. 6 hours later, the passageway that Green Sparrow spoke of had finally appeared within Lin Sun's field of vision. It was said to be a passageway, yet it was actually like a spacious path that led to the depths of the starry sky. Countless snow white and broken bones were piled up and laid out, and it was like a white ray of light that stretched towards the depths of the starry sky. Those bones had lost their divinity since a long time ago, yet they were still extremely firm after experiencing the corrosion of time. Before heading to the Sunluo underworld, I have to remind you that there's a mysterious restricted area there, and it's filled with mysterious, unfathomable, and great terror. Since ancient times until now, many almighty figures have perished there. Green Sparrow's intelligent eyes were suffused with a strange expression, and she suddenly said, "However, I suggest that you go there." Lin Sun was stunned. "What do you mean?" "That mysterious restricted area is boundlessly terrifying to others, yet it might be a rare place of fortuitous encounters to you. It all depends on if you have the courage to go there." Green Sparrow's words were secretive. P.S. There will be 2 chapters before 7 p.m. Literature Library. Chapter 2518. Before entering the Kiliakosm battlefield, Cyan Sparrow once said, "On this bloody road of no return, there were at least thousands of battlefields, nearly 100 mysterious forbidden areas, and 49 immortal passes of various sizes. And the mysterious forbidden areas were described as the most dangerous and terrifying place." Lin Sun couldn't help but be awestruck. He didn't know how terrible the so-called mysterious forbidden areas in the Sunluo underworld that Cyan Sparrow mentioned were. "If the time is right, I'd like to have a try," Lin Sun said after thinking for a while. Cyan Sparrow said, "It will take about 2 months to get through the Sunluo underworld. After that, you can reach the first Immortal Pass, which is also called the Immortal Emperor City. It's too early to talk about this now. You'll understand when you get there." Lin Sun nodded and walked along the wreckage tunnel towards the depths of the starry sky. There was a strange, shifting power on this tunnel. Walking on it made people feel like they were traveling through time and space and roaming in the universe. In just 15 minutes, with a burst of space ripples, Lin Sun came to a strange world in a blink of an eye. There was a purple sun hanging in the lead gray sky. Its luster was dim, making the world dim. The wind was whistling, sobbing and complaining, cold and gloomy. All kinds of cold air flows were flowing in the air, making people feel extremely depressed. Lin Sun was located on the bank of a river. Further ahead was a sparse jungle. The trees were all bare, dark and withered, emitting wisps of black smoke. Cyan Sparrow suddenly said, "According to the ancient legend, after death in the last era, the souls of all living beings in the world would enter the netherworld, walk the yellow spring road, cross the river of forgetfulness, drink the soup of Mengpa, and then enter the 6 paths of the netherworld to be reincarnated according to their good and evil deeds. And there are many mysterious and terrible places in the netherworld, such as the Gate of Hell, the 18 levels of Hell, the Sinful Blood River, and so on. The great figures that control the nether hell are even more terrifying. They possess mysterious and unfathomable supreme divine abilities, are skilled in the Tao of life souls, and control the energy of destiny. According to the saying of our era, existences that are able to possess such attainments have at least peeked into some secrets of the Tao of destiny." Lin Sun narrowed his eyes slightly. He had heard from Cyan Sparrow that the previous era was called the Immortal Martial Era, and the current era was called the Spirit Martial Era. However, he only knew a concept. He knew nothing about what had happened in the last era and what sort of changes had led to the final destruction. Perhaps only when he reached the eternal true world would he have more chances to understand the various secrets of the change of eons. Of course, if one's cultivation attained the state of prying into the profundities of eternity and comprehending the laws of destiny, then one would similarly be able to stand above the myriad of Taos, look down upon the changes of the world, see through the profundities of the passage of time, and experience the secrets of the rise and fall of an era. There's only a single path of survival in this ghastly netherworld, and it's called the Nether Blood Path. Do you see the violet-colored sun beneath the sky? As the Cyan Sparrow spoke, she gazed into the distance. That great purple sun shines on eternally. The Yellow Springs Blood Road is under that great sun alone. Lin Sun looked up and decided to take action. The ghastly netherworld was very large, and the scenery was strange. The sky, the earth, the mountains, and the rivers were all surrounded by wisps of cold and oppressive air, just like the real underworld. Walking in it, one might get lost and never find the way back if he was not careful. People under the Emperor realm didn't dare to wander here at all. However, with Cyan Sparrow guiding the way, Lin Sun wasn't afraid of going astray. Whoosh! With a flash of his figure, Lin Sun swept forward like a flowing rainbow. On the way, he frequently changed directions, passing through one strange and unpredictable place after another. He took twists and turns, as if he had fallen into a large maze. After a full hour, suddenly, a stone arch bridge appeared in Lin Sun's sight, stretching across the void to the depths of the gray mist. The bridge was paved with mottled bluestone, with carved guardrails on both sides. Under the bridge, clouds and mist lingered like rolling waves. Waves of foul and bloody smell diffused from the depths of the clouds and mist under the stone bridge, revealing a corrosive and fishy smell. Vaguely, there seemed to be a ghostly wail and wolf howl, which made people shudder. Seeing this scene, Lin Sun couldn't help but be awestruck. The stone arch bridge and the surrounding scenery were full of strangeness and ominousness. It is said that this is the bridge of helplessness in the underworld of the immortal martial era. Under the bridge, the river of forgetfulness flows, and there is also a blood pool called the Blood River Pool. The Green Sparrow sent a voice transmission in a low voice. All specters that fall into the netherworld will have their memories erased after they pass through the bridge of helplessness, and then they'll be restrained in the netherworld to enter the cycle of reincarnation once more. If they have done too much evil in their lifetime and step on the bridge of helplessness, they will fall into the Blood River Pool and be immersed in it forever, suffering endless pain. It is said that on the east and west sides of the bridge of helplessness, there used to be a nether palace and a nether platform leading to the 18 levels of purgatory. But this is just a legend. No one dares to judge whether it is true or not. After all, these are some rumors of the last era, which can no longer be investigated. Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but be shocked. The Nether Palace, the River of Forgetfulness, the Nether Purgatory, the Blood River of the Dead. All of this sounded so inconceivable. If it really existed during the last era, then what sort of scene would it have been? Cyan Sparrow said, "Stepping on the bridge of helplessness is equivalent to stepping on the road to the Nether. You will encounter all kinds of dangers along the way. You should be prepared." Lin Sun nodded and took out the abyssal sword cauldron. Then he stepped on the stone arch bridge. Walking on it, the blue stone under his feet was filled with the mottled air of time. Under the bridge, the smoke was steaming, emitting a unique aura of the underworld, cold and unusual. Lin Sun couldn't see what was in the depths of the mist under the bridge with his divine awareness. On the contrary, when he was investigating, his divine awareness felt extremely cold and depressed. Lin Sun suddenly noticed that the guardrails on both sides of the bridge of helplessness were carved with many vague patterns of cloud patterns. These patterns were extremely strange. There were burning bloody flowers covering the land, and muddy water of the Nether Palace flowing ceaselessly. There were various strict buildings engraved with strange inscriptions, which were marked with 6 paths, Nether Palace, 10 Great Yama, Pool of Reincarnation. There were hundreds of ghosts and scenes of purgatory. Although the scenes and cloud patterns had long been blurred, they still emitted a kind of shocking charm in this gloomy world. Lin Sun walked forward slowly and kept watching. He was more and more surprised. Could it be that these depictions are of the netherworld of the last era? Suddenly, the abyssal sword cauldron produced a strange fluctuation. The nirvana order nurtured in it quietly turned into a lotus pattern at this moment, emerging and flowing with hundreds of millions of magnificent rays of light. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. Before he could react, the lotus pattern formed by the nirvana order released a ray of order light, which gently swept across the guardrails on both sides of the bridge of helplessness. Lin Sun immediately saw all kinds of scenes about the netherworld, and the netherworld engraved on the guardrails were copied into the lotus pattern. Hmm. How can you order power? Cyan Sparrow seemed to be shocked. Is it absorbing the origin power of the netherworld here? It seemed to be very uncalm and rarely lost its composure. Lin Sun immediately realized that it was the first time for Cyan Sparrow to encounter such a thing. At the same time, he couldn't help but wonder why the Nirvana Order would take the initiative to copy these scenes. Could it be that there was a secret about the netherworld hidden in it? Have you ever heard of any grade of order power in this world that can achieve this? Lin Sun asked while observing. Cyan Sparrow said without hesitation, I only dare to confirm one thing. This can't be produced by the Earth rank order. As for the Heaven rank order, it's hard to say. It was obvious that Cyan Sparrow was shocked and full of doubts. The immemorial downfall, tribulation, a lone lotus blooming. How can the order of Mahesvara, that master, the master of the heart dimension, waited for so many years be ordinary? Lin Sun thought in his heart, looks like I've underestimated the Nirvana order. Its secret is far from as simple as I thought. In fact, Lin Sun knew that with his current cultivation, he could merely control the Nirvana order and the Order Phoenix Flame, and he was utterly unable to understand the supreme secret within. This was called knowing how, but not knowing why. In this world, those who could comprehend and control the essence of order power were existences whose cultivation surpassed the progenitor realm. Lin Sun took a deep breath and continued forward. As he walked further and further on the bridge of helplessness, the lotus pattern formed by the Nirvana order ceaselessly copied the various scenes and patterns on both sides of the guardrails. It felt as if the Nirvana order regarded these scenes as a kind of power, and it was constantly refining them for its own use, supplementing and perfecting itself. This caused Lin Sun to be even more shocked. Along the way, Cyan Sparrow was also so shocked that her eyes widened, and she couldn't even speak a word. She was knowledgeable and came from the immortal Emperor Yuan family, so she had seen many strange and incredible things. But it was also the first time that she saw the power of order could actually produce such a magical effect, and it was even active as if it had a spirit. After a full time of drinking a cup of tea, with a buzzing sound, the lotus pattern formed by the Nirvana order turned into a gray light and returned to the abyssal sword cauldron. At this time, Lin Sun suddenly noticed that he had come to the other side of the bridge of helplessness. This might be the reason why the Nirvana order returned to the abyssal sword cauldron. It's really mysterious. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. Since he started cultivating, it was the first time that he had seen the Nirvana order produce such a strange change. It was completely beyond his expectation. Cyan Sparrow, who had long been unable to restrain her inner doubts and curiosity, urged, after absorbing and refining so many imprints and patterns related to the netherworld, quickly see if there are any changes in your natal emperor weapon. Lin Sun's heart stirred, and he probed the abyssal sword cauldron with his divine sense. Chapter 25:19. The inside of abyssal sword cauldron was like an abyssal world, filled with chaotic air. A Taoist sword was floating in the chaos, bathed in the crystal-clear purple phoenix flame of order. Over the years, abyssal sword cauldron had absorbed nearly 10% of the power of the phoenix flame of order. Both its appearance and power had undergone earth-shaking changes. One day, when abyssal sword cauldron completely absorbed the phoenix flame of order, it would be able to transform into a divine weapon imprinted with the power of order. Of course, it was still too early. On the other side, the lotus pattern of nirvana was floating, enshrouded in obscure and strange fluctuations of the Great Way. It didn't seem to have changed much, but when Lin Sun probed into it with his divine sense, he immediately noticed that the nirvana order had changed. In the past, the nirvana order contained the power of nirvana freedom heaven, such as the world of samsara, the great wall of stars across the sky, and so on. And now, in the nirvana order, there was an additional blurry netherworld palace. The netherworld was established on the vast land under the great wall of stars. There were bridge of helplessness, river of forgetfulness, blood river pool, road to the underworld, 18 purgatories, 10 kings of hell, 6 paths of hell. Every scene was very blurry, and some are even incomplete and incomplete. But the aura it emitted was exactly the same as the netherworld chi that Lin Sun sensed on the bridge of helplessness. What's going on? Is the Nirvana order going to rebuild the netherworld? Lin Sun was surprised. Soon, he noticed that on the inner wall of Abyssal Sword Cauldron, there were strands of strange tadpole-like twisted Taoist patterns, which were looming, emitting the same aura as the netherworld. It should be known that Abyssal Sword Cauldron was refined with the 9 Emperors of Kunlun as the main material, which contained all kinds of incredible magical effects. And with the emergence of these strands of Taoist patterns that seemed to come from the netherworld, the appearance of Abyssal Sword Cauldron also underwent a subtle change. Is this also a kind of order power? Lin Sun was lost in thought. Those strange Taoist patterns were very vague, but their aura was extremely amazing, which was not weaker than the Phoenix Flame of Order. This made Lin Sun suspect that what was imprinted in these Taoist patterns was probably the power of order of the netherworld, but it was extremely weak and vague. How could the order power of the last era have a chance to survive? If there was a possibility of it reappearing in the world, it might be related to the Nirvana order. Thinking of this, Lin Sun's heart trembled as he realized a key. Nirvana. Didn't Nirvana mean reconstruction and rebirth? Could it be that this was the core magical effect of the Nirvana order? All of a sudden, Lin Sun thought of too many things. The Order of Nirvana was born from the source energy of the ancient path of the starry sky, but it had disappeared for countless eons. His master, the master of the core dimension, had been waiting for countless eons. The path of an undying supreme being, nirvanic rebirth in the heavens, eternal oblivion tribulation, a single lotus blossoming. Lin Sun now knew that the lone lotus was him, but he didn't really understand what the immortal supremacy and nirvana of freedom were. Immortal, these 2 words were not casually called. This often represented a level that surpassed the ancestor realm. For example, the undying beings of the undying emperor clans. And what is this nirvana of freedom? It took a long time for Lin Sun to calm down. No matter what, he dared to conclude that the profundities of the rebirth order were bound to be extremely shocking. The abnormality of the Nirvana order before was very likely to have obtained a netherworld rank. The power of order. And all this also caused subtle changes in his Abyssal Sword Cauldron. This was Lin Sun's judgment. How is it? Cyan Sparrow looked at Lin Sun eagerly. Lin Sun said, "There are indeed some subtle changes, but I'm not sure whether it's good or bad." Lin Sun didn't speak out his conjectures one by one. It was too shocking. Once Cyan Sparrow told the big shots of the immortal Emperor clan of Yuan, he didn't know what kind of storm it would cause. You must be hiding something. But I also know that this is your secret, so I don't want to ask. Cyan Sparrow snorted coldly. And you can rest assured that no matter what happens along the way, I'm just a guide. Everything about you, I will only tell my Mississippi. As for whether my miss will tell others, I don't know. Lin Sun smiled and thought that this might be one of the reasons why Yuan Qingheng left Cyan Sparrow here to show him the way. At this moment, the place where he stood was on the other side of the bridge of helplessness. It was another scene here, full of rolling black mist. A purple sun shone alone in the sky. Vaguely, a burning bright red path could be seen extending to the depths of the black mist. Next, you have to be careful. The soldiers, generals, and kings of hell on the road to the underworld will appear at any time. If you're fast enough, you'll be able to pass through the gates of hell in about a month. The mysterious forbidden area that I told you about before is located near the gates of hell. If you really have the guts to go there, it won't be too late for me to remind you. Lin Sun nodded. However, he didn't act immediately. His eyes were like lightning, looking at the void on the other side, as if he had found something. It was silent here. Because it was too quiet, it seemed very abnormal. As Lin Sun's eyes swept over, he immediately understood why this place was abnormal. Because in this world that was covered in black fog, there were actually quite a few figures lying in ambush in the void within a radius of 500 kilometers. These figures were in groups of 3 or 5, which should belong to different forces. They were scattered in different directions. Lin Sun didn't know what secret method they used to hide in the space and completely hide their figures. They were like poisonous snakes hiding in the dark, so it was extremely difficult to detect them. Even the spiritual awareness couldn't detect their existence. If Lin Sun hadn't run the divine eye, which could see through the vanity and see through the vanity, he would have almost been deceived. But now, everything was laid bare before his eyes, down to the slightest detail. In an instant, he saw that there were more than 30 people lying in ambush around, belonging to 7 forces. It was even to the extent that he clearly noticed that when the gazes of these people descended onto him, all of them revealed an imperceptible wisp of piercingly cold expressions, and it was like a group of wild beasts that had locked onto a lamb that had accidentally fallen into a trap. Looks like these fellows are all people that are trying to take advantage of others. Laying in ambush on the other side of the bridge of helplessness is indeed a superb position to ambush and kill. How could an ordinary person possibly notice the layer upon layer of killing intent lying in ambush within the black mist in the surroundings? Lin Sun's lips curled up with a hint of coldness. He guessed the intention of these people lying in ambush here. At the same time, it also let him know that many strong people had entered the Sinluo underworld from the realm of the dead long before him. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun followed the bright red road to the underworld and rushed into the depths of the black mist. Whoosh! Just after moving forward for less than a moment, a cold sword light suddenly pierced out from one side of his body. It seemed to appear out of thin air, tricky and vicious, and went straight to his back. Almost at the same time, on the other side of the void, several figures jumped out and attacked Lin Sun from different angles. Their movements were extremely fast, and their attacks were like lightning and thunder. Obviously, they intended to kill Lin Sun with one blow. In all directions, in the sky and on the ground, there was a terrible killing intent, which completely blocked Lin Sun's way of retreat like an inescapable net. If it was any other Emperor Realm expert here, they wouldn't be able to dodge this sudden attack and would be instantly killed. Their treasures would also be looted. In fact, all these robbers were extremely powerful. If they were weak, they could cross all the way from the ancient nightmare battlefield and the realm of the dead to here. Unfortunately, they chose the wrong target this time. Die! Lin Sun didn't move, but a terrible breath burst out of his body. The abyssal sword cauldron floating in front of him suddenly shone brightly. Boom! Like a hurricane, Lin Sun was the center, and the endless light turned into a big abyss that could devour the sky and the earth. It was merely a single strike, yet it directly crushed, and wiped out all the attacks that came from all directions. As if being struck by thunder, those robbers all shook violently and flew out fiercely, with blood spurting out of their mouths and noses. Before they could stand firm, an ancient and vast Taoist sword swept out of the abyssal sword cauldron and swept in the void. One sword of life and death. Countless brilliant, resplendent, and fierce strands of sword chi shot out violently from the Tao sword, and they transformed into a might that covered the heavens and the earth. They were dense like a violent storm, and they slashed open countless intersecting rifts in space. Those robbers had just suffered a heavy blow, and before they could stand firm, they were covered by countless sword chi. They didn't even have a chance to dodge. No, damn it. In an instant, incomparably shrill cries resounded, and they seemed exceptionally horrifying in this world that was filled with surging black mist. After a while, these screams disappeared. All the emperors who had sneak attacked Lin Sun before were wiped out in body and soul. All the others that were hiding in the surrounding space gasped when they witnessed this scene, and their entire bodies felt cold. They instantly knew that this young man who'd come all alone was absolutely a formidable fellow that couldn't be offended, and his strength was terrifying to the extreme. Not even a 9th realm ancestor. No wonder you only dare to do some despicable and insidious sneak attacks. A trace of disdain flashed in Lin Sun's eyes. It was as if he had done something that couldn't be more normal. After killing these reckless things, he dusted off his clothes and continued on the Yellow Springs Road. In the blink of an eye, he had disappeared in the vast black mist. Those robbers hiding in the void looked at each other, especially when they thought of the cold eyes cast by Lin Sun before he left, which still made their hearts palpitate. What kind of eyes was that? It was as cold as a knife, penetrating straight to the heart, like the eyes of a god overlooking ants, full of dignity that could not be provoked. Who was that guy? How could there be such a powerful figure in the world? Obviously, these strong men might have arrived in the Sunluo underworld in advance, so they didn't know what happened to Wen Xiaoheng at all. Otherwise, they wouldn't dare to regard Lin Sun as prey at all. P.S. The second and third chapters are here. Finished at about 10:30 in the evening. Library of Literature. Chapter 2520. The color was as thick as burning blood, soaking through the endless dark red ground under his feet. In this vast and desolate area, there was a road to the underworld. Everywhere else was shrouded in black fog. Even his divine sense could not see the scene in the black fog. Following Cyan Sparrow's instructions, Lin Sun did not teleport, but galloped along the bloody road to the underworld. His speed was naturally incomparable to teleportation, but this was the safest and most reliable way. Along the way, Lin Sun could clearly feel the cold and violent aura of heaven and earth. It was filled with a bloody aura. It was like a place where the gods had spilled their blood, or an ancient battlefield. The air was filled with a bloody smell that made one's mind restless. If one's will was not firm enough, one might be triggered by the bloody smell and lose control of one's emotions, turning into a bloodthirsty lunatic. One might even suffer from qi deviation and destroy one's Taoist foundation. Even Lin Sun had to operate his cultivation to keep his mind and heart clear while moving forward vigilantly. Boom! Suddenly, a group of underworld soldiers rushed out of the thick black fog. They were riding on huge black fog horses. The eyes of the horses were black, and corrosive black air was spewing out of their noses and mouths. Their aura was ferocious and violent. These underworld soldiers were covered in black armor, revealing only a pair of scarlet eyes that emitted a cold and ruthless luster. They were surrounded by black fog, and each of them was well equipped. There were 13 of them, and their aura was no weaker than a third-level Emperor Realm cultivator. But it felt like they were a single entity. Their aura was in harmony with each other, and the ferocious aura they exuded was far beyond a third-level Emperor Realm cultivator. Kill! The group of underworld soldiers roared in unison. An unparalleled murderous aura spread from their bodies and stirred up the area. Rumble! The warhorses under them strode forward and actually moved through the void. In an instant, they arrived in front of Lin Sun and stomped down hard on Lin Sun. The underworld soldiers on the horses stabbed out with their black spears. The spears were as sharp as lightning and emitted a terrifying aura that crushed and collapsed the void. What was more terrifying was that they were releasing a mysterious power of great way. Under such a fierce attack, Lin Sun remained calm. The abyssal sword cauldron roared and rushed out, flowing with hundreds of millions of magnificent lights of the Great Way. Amidst intense rumbling, the 13 nether soldiers and their horses were crushed into pieces at this moment, and they transformed into surging black-colored mist that was completely devoured by the abyssal sword cauldron. With a single strike, he annihilated the group of enemies as easily as breaking dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. However, Lin Sun was stunned. He had intended to probe the details of the netherworld soldier and the mysteries of the power it controlled with reservation in this strike. Who would have thought that the opponent would be blasted apart like a piece of paper? One must know that even a third-level martial emperor would not be this weak. The combined strength of these underworld soldiers far surpassed a third-level martial emperor. But now they have been wiped out just like that. It's the power of the netherworld collected by the abyssal sword cauldron. Soon, Lin Sun noticed that in the abyssal sword cauldron, wisps of strange Taoist patterns with the aura of the netherworld were flickering and looming. After devouring the black-colored mist dispersed by the 13 nether soldiers, these strange Taoist patterns were still blurry, but they were obviously clearer. Lin Sun counted that there were 81 strange Taoist patterns in total, and each of them exuded an aura that belonged to the netherworld. It seems that after possessing these strange Taoist patterns, the Abyssal Sword Cauldron also has a natural power to restrain the Nether soldiers. Only in this way can it defeat those Nether soldiers so easily. Lin Sun understood. He temporarily called this power the Netherworld Force. He called those Taoist patterns the Netherworld Taoist patterns. And the Netherworld that was absorbed and derived by the Nirvana Order was called the Netherworld Order. Your natal emperor weapon has really become different. Cyan Sparrow sighed with emotion, as if she could see through some of the mysteries even if Lin Sun didn't tell her. Lin Sun smiled and continued to move forward. Not long after, he encountered another group of Nether soldiers. This time, there were more than 30 of them, and each of them was ferocious and murderous. Faced with such a situation, ordinary Emperor Realm figures would definitely flee immediately and not dare to fight. But since Lin Sun already knew the magical effect of the Abyssal Sword Cauldron, how could he miss such an opportunity? Boom! The Abyssal Sword Cauldron swept out. In just a few blinks of an eye, all the Nether soldiers were killed, and the rolling black-colored mist after their death was swallowed by the Abyssal Sword Cauldron. Lin Sun noticed at once that the 81 Netherworld Taoist patterns in the Abyssal Sword Cauldron were obviously more solid. In particular, one of the Netherworld Taoist patterns showed a faint sign of becoming clear and complete. With the change of the Netherworld Taoist patterns, the power of the Netherworld force released by the Abyssal Sword Cauldron was also improved. This kind of harvest made Lin Sun excited. He couldn't help but look forward to what kind of transformation would happen when the 81 Netherworld Taoist patterns became clear and complete. Soon, Lin Sun set out again. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. As time went by, Lin Sun was frequently attacked by Nether soldiers along the way, ranging from 4 or 5 to dozens of them. Lin Sun naturally didn't hold back when facing such prey that came to him, and he used the Abyssal Sword Cauldron to annihilate all of them. As it absorbed more and more energy, 5 of the 81 Netherworld Taoist patterns within the Abyssal Sword Cauldron had already become complete and clearly visible after 3 days of changes. They were like 5 lifelike fish that were filled with mysterious and unfathomable intelligence, and they were far from something other Netherworld Taoist patterns could compare to. On the other hand, the might of the Abyssal Sword Cauldron to crush the Nether soldiers had become even more terrifying, and it revealed an absolutely overwhelming strength. That fellow wouldn't be the great emperor from an Eternal Emperor clan, right? A group of figures followed Lin Sun from afar on the Nether path behind him. During these 3 days, they didn't encounter any attacks while following behind Lin Sun, and it was equivalent to avoiding all sorts of dangers. This was naturally because of Lin Sun. He was equivalent to a vanguard that blazed a path through all the obstacles for these cultivators at the back. However, at the same time that they gained an extremely great advantage, these cultivators were shocked by the strength Lin Sun revealed, and their minds were unable to calm down. At this moment, their mental states had changed, and they were filled with reverence and fear towards Lin Sun. No matter who he is, he's a peerlessly ferocious figure that we can't afford to offend. Someone spoke in a serious voice. Watch your words. We've taken advantage of that fellow Taoist all along the way, and it's even to the extent that it's very likely that he'd noticed our tracks a long time ago, yet he didn't care about it. Obviously, he couldn't be bothered to make a fuss about it with us. A figure of the senior generation spoke in a low voice. I have a suggestion. If that fellow Taoist encounters any troublesome danger on the way, then we should lend him a hand as well. These words obtained the agreement of everyone. Lin Sun had naturally noticed the tracks of these cultivators a long time ago, but he paid no attention to them when he saw that they were only following from afar and didn't reveal any ill intent. Just like this, they traveled on the Nether path for an entire 7 days. The slaughter all along the way allowed another 7 complete Netherworld Taoist patterns amongst the 81 Netherworld Taoist patterns within the Abyssal Sword Cauldron. Coupled with the Netherworld Taoist patterns from before, there were already 12 complete Netherworld Taoist patterns. This kind of harvest made Lin Sun's slaughter along the way no longer boring. Instead, It was filled with a sense of expectation for continuous harvest. However, in the following day, they gained nothing and didn't encounter a single Netherworld soldier. Lin Sun couldn't help frowning at this abnormal scene. Could it be that someone had already swept away all the Netherworld soldiers on the way ahead of time? It was very likely. It should be known that there was only one Nether path, and it was no more than 300 meters wide. If there was a group of experts walking ahead, the Netherworld soldiers they encountered along the way would naturally be swept away by these experts. For other Emperor Realm experts, walking behind others without any danger was undoubtedly equivalent to taking advantage of it. It was a fortunate thing, but for Lin Sun, it seemed a little bad, because it meant that he could no longer collect enough power to make the Netherworld Taoist patterns transform. How could he be happy? Immediately, Lin Sun quickened his pace. Very soon, Lin Sun suddenly noticed that there was a chaotic and intense battle coming from the depths of the dark mist in the distance. There seemed to be a great battle taking place there. Sure enough, Lin Sun completely verified his speculation. Swoosh! In the next moment, he'd transformed into a ray of light that flashed towards the area where the fluctuations of the battle arose. Kill! The intense sounds of battle shot into the sky and surged through the wind and clouds, and it was like the roars of fiend gods. Kill! Numerous terrifying Tao arts were mixed within the various magic treasures as they charged through the heavens and the earth, and they erupted with blazing and dazzling light that illuminated the world. Kill! Numerous Emperor Realm figures fought through the heavens and the earth. Obviously, they were from the same camp and were fighting side by side. The scene before his eyes seemed like an extremely intense battlefield. Fresh blood sprayed violently. Magic treasures flew about, and terrifying Tao arts rumbled through the heavens and the earth and erupted with boundless light. When Lin Sun rushed over, he witnessed such a scene, and he couldn't help but be shocked as he sensed the horrifying aura that assaulted his face. Shockingly, the opponents of those Emperor Realm experts were an army of Netherworld soldiers led by a Nether general. There were over 1,000 of them, and they rode war horses as they charged through the surging black mist. The Nether general was the most terrifying. His armor flowed with the scarlet-red glow of the Tao, and he held a black halberd in his hand. Moreover, he emanated ferocious might that caused the surroundings to dim. At the very least, he was equivalent to a 9th realm martial ancestor. On the other hand, the army of Netherworld soldiers weren't weak as well. When they converged together, their auras fused together, and they cooperated tacitly with each other. As they fought, they seemed to have formed an enormous slaughter formation. Every single Netherworld soldier was ferocious and unafraid of death. Every single charge was boundlessly terrifying, and it seemed as if they were capable of slashing space into pieces and overturning the world. If it was just a few tens of Netherworld soldiers, then it would naturally be much easier to deal with. However, the scene before their eyes was one where there were over 1,000 Netherworld soldiers. They formed a dense mass that covered the heavens and the earth, and it was sufficient to cause the scalps of any Emperor Realm expert to go numb. Coupled with the presence of a Nether general, even a 9th realm martial ancestor might not be able to annihilate all of them no matter how exhausted they were, and it was even to the extent that they might be exhausted to death. P.S. The 4th update is here. The eruption is complete. Yes, I finally dare to weekly ask for monthly votes now. Chapter 25-21. Compared to the army of Nether soldiers, there were only over 20 martial emperors. They were like a wave in the ocean, extremely inconspicuous. But even then, no one retreated. Instead, they charged forward with all their might. Lin Sun noticed that even though there weren't many martial emperors, there was Great Emperor Ju Ing and 3 9th Realm ancestors. 2 of the 9th Realm ancestors were fighting intensely with the Nether general. The other 9th Realm ancestor was guarding by Great Emperor Ju Ying's side, and he led a group of martial emperors to charge forward in the army of Nether soldiers. Obviously, they didn't want to fight to the death with this terrifying army of Nether soldiers. They just wanted to kill their way out of the encirclement and go deeper into the Nether Spring Road. However, It was extremely difficult for this group of martial emperors to kill their way out of the encirclement in a short period of time. The reason was very simple. There were too many Nether soldiers, and they didn't fear death. They charged forward wave after wave, causing these martial emperors to find it difficult to move forward. In the battle with the Nether general, even though the two Ninth Realm ancestors fought with all their might, they could only restrain the Nether general, and they couldn't kill it. Lin Sun noticed that the supreme figure at the center was a man in plain clothes. His purple hair hung down, and he held a golden jade ruler in his hand. His attacks were extremely ferocious and overbearing, and he was extremely valiant. The man in plain clothes was at the 6th level of the martial emperor realm. His entire body glowed brilliantly, and he was rather handsome. When his eyes opened and closed, a pair of mysterious yin and yang fish surged into appearance. It was profound, unfathomable, and extremely terrifying. Even though he was in a tight encirclement and it was difficult for him to move forward, there wasn't any seriousness on his face. Instead, he revealed a trace of impatience. It was as if he was tired of this battle that felt like he was stuck in a swamp. This allowed Lin Sun to determine that the man in plain clothes should possess a powerful trump card that was sufficient to deal with the predicament before him. The reason why he hadn't used it was probably because he wasn't willing to waste it on such an opponent. As expected, as if he wanted to verify Lin Sun's guess, it wasn't long before a green bamboo slip that emitted a thick and boundless aura appeared in the man's hand. Hesitation could be seen on his face. Obviously, the value of the green bamboo slip was so great that he was slightly reluctant to use it. Seeing this, Lin Sun didn't hesitate to charge forward and activate the Abyssal Sword Cauldron. Boom! The Abyssal Sword Cauldron, which was wrapped in dazzling Tao light, smashed towards the densely packed underworld soldiers with a deafening roar. Bang, bang, bang. As the Abyssal Sword Cauldron descended, it was like a divine mountain falling from the sky, smashing 7 or 8 netherworld soldiers and their war horses into pieces on the spot. The plain-clothed man and the others were shocked by this scene, and they looked over in succession. When they noticed Lin Sun's appearance, they couldn't help being stunned. What was going on? Someone dared to come to their rescue in such a dangerous battle. Being saved by someone was, of course, a moving matter. However, seeing that Lin Sun came alone and looked very strange, it was completely beyond the expectation of the plain-clothed man that Lin Sun would take such a big risk to participate in the battle. He was a little confused. Since when did the vast 1,000 battle domains have such a chivalrous and warm-hearted person? Young master, could it be that this guy saw through your identity and deliberately came to curry favor with you? Someone muttered. The plain-clothed man was startled and said, "He risked his life to help us. Who would dare to curry favor with me and risk his life like this person?" Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Indeed, while they were talking, there was another thunderous roar in the distance. Then, as Lin Sun attacked, the Abyssal Sword Cauldron continued to kill. Wherever it passed, groups of netherworld soldiers were crushed and their bodies exploded, turning into rolling black mist. The plain-clothed man and the others were dumbfounded by the devastating scene. This person is actually a peerless great emperor. No wonder he dares to risk his life to come here. Someone exclaimed, "Killing netherworld soldiers like tearing a painting. It's too incredible. Indeed, too fierce. Who is this person? Why haven't I heard of him?" The plain-clothed man's pupils flashed, and his heart shook. The power of a netherworld soldier was not worth mentioning, but when hundreds or thousands of netherworld soldiers gathered together to charge, it could be said to be terrifying. Otherwise, their group wouldn't have been trapped here. Therefore, when he saw Lin Sun's irresistible killing power, the plain-clothed man could not help but be moved. How could such a person be an ordinary person? How could such a person take the initiative to curry favor with him? Let's attack together, attack with all our strength. The plain-clothed man took a deep breath and gave the order. Everyone roared in agreement. Lin Sun's appearance was like a sharp awl, piercing into the army of netherworld soldiers and stirring up the situation of the entire battlefield. As a result, Many Netherworld soldiers rushed towards Lin Sun like a tide. This was equivalent to sharing a lot of pressure for the plain-clothed man and the others. Naturally, they understood that this was undoubtedly the best time to break out. As for Lin Sun, the harvest this time could be said to be huge. He was happy, and he displayed all his skills to constantly kill. In the eyes of others, those Netherworld soldiers were troublesome and difficult to deal with. But in his eyes, they were undoubtedly tempting prey, waiting to be hunted by him. Kill! At this moment, the Netherworld general that was fighting intensely with the two Ninth Realm ancestors in the distance noticed that something was wrong with the situation, and it noticed Lin Sun's existence. He let out an obscure and explosive shout. Instantly, practically all the Netherworld soldiers in the surroundings charged towards Lin Sun. The plain-clothed man and the others seized this opportunity to charge out of the heavy encirclement in one go, and all of them were in high spirits. When they looked back, they saw Lin Sun charging into the battlefield by himself, and the dense mass of Netherworld soldiers seemed as if they were fearless of death as they charged towards him. "Young master, leave quickly," someone reminded swiftly. They'd already killed their way out of the heavy encirclement, and it was very likely that variables would arise if they still didn't leave. However, the plain-clothed man grunted coldly and said, "If it wasn't for the assistance of that fellow Taoist, how could we possibly have the chance to kill our way out of the heavy encirclement? No matter if he did it for the sake of helping us or not, at this moment, Tantai Foam, can't watch helplessly as he fights alone." His words were sonorous, forceful, and powerful. Everyone was astounded. Before they could persuade him, the plain-clothed man had already pointed at the Netherworld general in the distance and said, "To capture the followers, we must first capture the leader. Let's go together and help the two elders kill that Netherworld general. Perhaps we'll be able to resolve this trap." As soon as he finished speaking, a loud shout resounded from afar. "Everyone, it's best that you leave quickly. Don't cause unnecessary trouble. Ling Xuanzi, naturally have a way to kill our way out. Quickly, don't hesitate, leave quickly." The voice revealed an urging tone. This was naturally spoken by Lin Sun because he didn't want those Netherworld soldiers to be seized by the plain-clothed man's group. The plain-clothed man couldn't help but be stunned. This fellow is actually refusing to help? The others seemed as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders, and they persuaded. "Young master, that fellow Taoist over there has already said it. This opportunity isn't easy to come by, so we should leave quickly. The Nether Springs path is filled with danger, and we must preserve our strength in order to kill our way out alive and arrive before the first Eternal Imperial Pass." The plain-clothed man hesitated for a moment, and then he raised his eyes to look at Lin Sun, who was on the battlefield, and asked in a clear voice, "Fellow Taoist Ling Xuanzi, may I ask why you're helping us?" Lin Sun fought as he spoke righteously. "I don't have any other ability, and I just like to help others." Some people almost spat, and they had strange gazes. If it wasn't for Lin Sun having indeed helped them greatly, they would have almost started scolding him. "What do you mean help others? We're all Emperor Realm figures that have lived for countless years, all right? Who are you trying to deceive with such a childish and laughable reason?" The plain-clothed man's expression became strange as well, and the corners of his mouth twitched. After a short while, he said, "Fellow Taoist, that leave quickly." Lin Sun interrupted him bluntly. The plain-clothed man didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Could it be that this fellow really isn't afraid of death? "Young master, since this person is so chivalrous and willing to help others, then what are we waiting for? Let's just leave." Suddenly, the two Ninth Realm ancestors that had been fighting the Netherworld general in the distance had flashed over explosively, and they left with the plain-clothed man without hesitation at all. The plain-clothed man was just about to refuse, yet he'd been crowded away a long time ago. He couldn't help but turn around and say loudly, "Fellow Taoist Ling Xuanzi, Tantai Foam, will remember this kindness. If we meet again in the future, I'll definitely treat you to some wine." His voice was still reverberating, but they'd already left. Lin Sun's gaze was slightly strange as well. This Tandai phone really does have some conscience. Bang! A terrifying aura of slaughter whistled over as the Netherworld general charged over explosively. Lin Sun didn't dare think too much about it, and he discarded all distracting thoughts as he swung the abyssal sword cauldron and fought with all his might. Even though he was alone, he actually revealed an invincible bearing. 100, 150, 200. As the battle continued, more and more Netherworld soldiers were killed by Lin Sun, and the black mist they devoured was like an endless stream that flowed ceaselessly into the abyssal sword cauldron. Such a harvest caused Lin Sun's fighting spirit to rise even more. He wasn't in a hurry to kill the Netherworld general, because he was worried that once the Netherworld general died, the Netherworld soldiers that had lost control would scatter like monkeys when a tree falls, and that wouldn't be worth it. 300, 400, 500. Looking from afar, the black mist surged as the battle shook the heavens, and wave after wave of Netherworld soldiers fell beneath Lin Sun's slaughter as if he was harvesting crops. So strong. He's too abnormal. He clearly had the chance to kill his way out of the encirclement, yet he didn't do so. Could it be that he intends to annihilate this entire army of Netherworld soldiers? How could such a ferocious and ruthless person exist in this world? At this moment, all the cultivators that were following behind Lin Sun had witnessed the scenes that were occurring on the battlefield, and for a time, all of them were flabbergasted while their hearts shook. Didn't we say earlier that if that fellow Taoist encountered any troublesome danger, then we would head over to help as well? Are we going over now? Someone couldn't help but ask. There's no need. Before all of them could recover from their shock, Lin Sun's loud shout resounded from afar. If all of you still intend to follow him all the way, then don't interfere. Just these words alone caused all those cultivators to be almost dumbstruck. They were even refused to help. How could such a person exist in this world? Chapter 25-22. Lin Sun didn't care what those practitioners thought. He had a premonition that when he killed all these Netherworld soldiers and Netherworld generals, it was extremely likely that the 81 Netherworld Tao markings within the abyssal sword cauldron would undergo a tremendous transformation. Kill, kill, kill. On the battlefield, the abyssal sword cauldron glowed. Every time it swept out, it would kill 7 or 8 Netherworld soldiers. The sword chi that shot out from the cauldron was incomparably sharp, killing the Netherworld soldiers as if they were grass. That Netherworld general had noticed that the situation was bad a long time ago, and it had struggled to flee many times. However, it was firmly suppressed by Lin Sun every single time, and Lin Sun didn't give it any chance to flee at all. At the end of the battle, Lin Sun even felt that he was a little slow. He immediately released the 5 Tao forms to fight alongside himself. The effect was obvious. His battle record began to skyrocket. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the Nether soldiers in the surroundings had been completely wiped out. At this moment, Lin Sun finally stopped holding back and annihilated the Netherworld general with a single strike. Bang! When the huge and burly figure of the Underworld general exploded, a copious amount of black smoke spread out. The abyssal sword cauldron took a few breaths of time to completely devour the black smoke that the Underworld general had transformed into. Right at this moment, all the cultivators that had fallen into a dumbstruck and shocked state had suddenly returned to their senses. When they saw Lin Sun standing alone on the deserted battlefield with no enemies, they were all stiff and shocked. A majestic army of Netherworld soldiers and a Netherworld general had actually been annihilated by that fellow alone. Who could have imagined this before? At this time, Lin Sun exhaled a long breath of turbid chi. He began to look at the abyssal sword cauldron while refining the divine medicine to replenish his lost physical strength. Inside the abyssal sword cauldron, the 81 Netherworld Tao patterns were all condensed to a complete state after absorbing the boundless Netherworld energy. Every single one of them was clearly visible and radiated a type of spirituality. Moreover, this transformation was still ongoing. Later on, the 81 Netherworld Tao markings started to wriggle incessantly and fuse together. In the end, they fused into 9 completely new netherworld Tao markings. Every single netherworld Tao marking revealed a different aura, and it emanated a different aura. Some were as cold as ice, bone-piercing cold. Some were violent and ostentatious, like a raging fire. Some emitted a corrosive charm. The 9 Tao patterns were like 9 branches of the netherworld law, and together they formed the complete netherworld profundity. However, it was still very blurry. When Lin Sun sensed it with his divine awareness, he found that each of these 9 new netherworld Tao patterns showed a kind of fragmented, mottled, incomplete, and vague characteristics. Could it be that I still need to condense it further before I can refine these 9 netherworld Tao patterns to a perfect state? Lin Sun was lost in thought. Even so, he still discovered that when the 9 netherworld Tao markings were condensed, the abyssal sword cauldron also underwent an obvious change, and there was an additional mysterious charm to it. At a glance, it was like the entrance to the netherworld, and it had a mysterious color that caused one's heart to palpitate. After a while, Lin Sun casually turned over his hand, and a pigeon egg-sized bead appeared in his palm. It was gloomy and turbid, and there seemed to be a river flowing in it, emitting a chilling aura. The Underworld Pearl. It was a precious treasure that only netherworld generals possessed, and it had unbelievable effects in refining Emperor weapons. In the Eternal World, it could be exchanged for 300,000 first-class Eternity Source Crystals. According to Cyan Sparrow, those who possessed the Underworld Pearl would rarely sell it. The reason was that this treasure was extremely rare, and it could only be obtained in the Dark Underworld. After thinking for a moment, Lin Sun put away the Underworld Pearl, and he intended to properly study the effects of this pearl after he gathered enough. Lin Sun glanced at the crowd of cultivators on the path behind him, and then he continued moving forward. "What are you standing there for? Let's go." Those cultivators seemed as if they'd awoken from a dream, and they hurriedly chased after him. 3 days later, it was the 14th day since Lin Sun stepped onto the Underworld Road. He saw Tantai Feng and his group again. The funny thing was that Tantai Feng's group was trapped by an army of netherworld soldiers this time, and there were an entire 2 netherworld generals and over 1,000 netherworld soldiers. When Lin Sun arrived, Tantai Feng's group noticed him as well, and they couldn't help but reveal surprised expressions. They seemed to have never expected that this chivalrous, courageous, and willing to help others fellow was actually still alive. "Hey, brother, quickly come and help." Someone couldn't help but cry out loudly, and he called Lin Sun a good person with a sarcastic tone. Tantai Feng frowned and berated, "Don't blame me for being merciless if you dare speak nonsense again." Lin Sun smiled in the distance, and he paid no attention to all of this. His figure flickered as he charged directly towards a netherworld general in the distance. Tantai Feng couldn't help but be stunned when he saw this. This fellow wouldn't be willing to help others again, right? All the others by his side had strange expressions because even they hadn't expected that Lin Sun would actually sacrifice himself and stand out once more under such circumstances. While they were pondering, Lin Sun had already entered into an intense battle with the Netherworld General. In merely a short moment, the Netherworld General was annihilated, and at the same time that Lin Sun obtained an Underworld Pearl, it allowed the Abyssal Sword Cauldron to absorb extremely surging Netherworld energy. In the distance, another Netherworld General was in battle with 2 Ninth Realm Martial Ancestors. Lin Sun shook his head when he saw this, and he abandoned the thought of seizing the prey before turning around and charging towards the distance. He didn't intend to stay here any longer. All along the way, he'd already tested that the Netherworld energy gathered by hunting Netherworld soldiers was practically negligible to the Abyssal Sword Cauldron. This allowed him to realize that if he wanted the 9 Netherworld Tao markings to continue transforming, then he could only hunt and kill Netherworld generals. At this moment, the reason Lin Sun gave up on hunting and killing the other Netherworld general was because those 2 Ninth Realm Martial Ancestors were present as well. Once he interfered and killed the Netherworld general, then who would the Underworld Pearl that was left behind belong to? Instead of causing unnecessary trouble, Lin Sun might as well give up. He intended to hurry on with his journey and strive to surpass Tantai Feng's group. In this way, he would be able to seize the initiative when he encountered another Netherworld general. "Wait, brother, you're trying to leave first," someone cried out strangely. Many people noticed this as well, and they couldn't help but frown. In this battlefield, they'd attracted the main force of the Netherworld soldiers. In this way, it would be comparatively easier for Lin Sun to leave. This was the same logic as 3 days ago. With Lin Sun holding back the Netherworld soldiers, they were able to easily kill their way out. However, Lin Sun leaving just like that caused those people to feel unbalanced in their hearts. Why should we hold back the enemy's forces and let this fellow seize the opportunity to leave? We didn't say that we should be willing to help others like him. Someone grunted coldly. "Let's go. Let's charge over together. We can't let him take advantage of us like that." Someone egged on. Tantai Feng couldn't help but be furious, and his gaze was cold. "Has your conscience been eaten by dogs? No matter what, Ling Xuanzi has helped us in the end, and he even killed a Netherworld general earlier. Yet all of you say such shameless words. You've lost all my face." His furious words caused those people's expressions to change, and they went silent out of fear. In the distance, the voice of a ninth realm ancestor who was fighting a Netherworld general sounded out. "Young master is right. Ling Xuanzi's combat strength is so terrifying to be able to easily kill a Netherworld general amidst an army. It's far from something an ordinary peak great emperor can compare to. How can such a figure be slandered?" This caused Tantai Feng's expression to ease up greatly, and he said, "Continue fighting. I've already said that everything we encountered along the way was a rare form of tempering. If it wasn't for that, I could very well utilize my trump card and kill all these enemies before me. But in that way, I'd lose the opportunity to temper myself." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand and led everyone to continue fighting. Lin Sun, who'd killed his way out of the encirclement a long time ago, heard their conversation, and he couldn't help but look at Tantai Feng in a different light. He didn't need to be grateful, and it was enough as long as he knew how to reason. Unfortunately, most people in this world didn't possess such a bearing like Tantai Feng. Swoosh! Lin Sun's figure quickly vanished on the Yellow Springs path that was covered by the boundless black mist. On the other hand, all the cultivators who followed behind him were dumbfounded and felt bitter. They didn't have such great ability to kill their way out of the encirclement of this army of Netherworld soldiers. In this way, it was equivalent to them losing the opportunity to follow behind Lin Sun and be protected all the way. Alas, we're finished. Many people sighed. "We've only met by chance, and we're neither relatives nor friends. We've already taken advantage of him all along the way, and it's already a great kindness to be protected by that fellow Taoist until now." An old man frowned and said in a low voice, "If you continue to push your luck and don't know how to be grateful, then it won't be justifiable." Instantly, everyone fell silent. "Come on, let's go kill the enemies. Helping others at this time is helping ourselves. Don't hold the illusion of taking advantage of him." The old man waved his hand and charged towards the battlefield. The others glanced at each other, gritted their teeth, and charged over as well. Just as the old man said, only by fighting side by side with Tantai Feng and the others would they have a chance to continue moving forward. Otherwise, no one would be able to pass through this calamity. When Tantai Feng saw this scene, he was even more moved. Since when did there appear so many good people in this world? All of you like to help others? Tantai Feng couldn't help but ask. The group of emperors was stunned, and then the old man in the lead said in a clear voice, "Although we're not talented, we're willing to follow fellow Taoist Ling Xuanzi's actions." Sure enough, Tantai Feng couldn't help but feel excited, and he said, "Rest assured, with me here, I, Tantai Feng, will definitely not let any of you be in danger." If Lin Sun saw this scene, he would probably be dumbfounded as well. After all, the reason why he was willing to help others wasn't pure. But obviously, Tantai Feng should have been moved by it. Of course, all of this had nothing to do with Lin Sun. On the boundless Netherworld road, he flew at an extremely fast speed. Along the way, he encountered some Netherworld soldiers, but he couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them and directly avoided them. Now, only Netherworld general-level characters could enter Lin Sun's eyes. P.S. Thank you for your monthly votes since yesterday. Although there won't be a lot of updates today, there will be more. Updates will be added at around 10 p.m. Chapter 25-23. Half a month passed in a hurry. Along the way, Lin Sun had encountered dozens of raids, but most of them were from hordes of ghost soldiers. The number of ghost generals was very small. In half a month, Lin Sun only killed 5 of them. He got 5 underworld beads and the surging power of the underworld. Now, the 9 netherworld Tao patterns in the abyssal sword cauldron had become much more condensed and showed signs of being complete. They were no longer as chaotic and fuzzy as they were at the beginning. Lin Sun didn't expect such a great harvest before he entered the Sunluo underworld. With my current combat strength, I'm no longer a threat to those of the 9th realm. Perhaps when I reach the 7th realm of the Void Tempering Realm, I'll be able to see if I can fight against the One Tao Ancestor. In addition, the power of the Abyssal Sword Cauldron has obviously improved a lot, which is enough to match my current combat power. Lin Sun comprehended the changes in his cultivation as he hurried along. And the Great Furnace Scripture has integrated half of the power of inheritance, but there's still a long way to go before it can really contain all kinds of Tao and develop all kinds of laws. Over the years, the 5 doppelgangers have been comprehending and integrating all kinds of power of inheritance in Lin Sun. It was not a big deal to just integrate them. On the basis of integration, opening up a new path and turning it into his own use was the goal. This was to carry on the past and open up the future. Up to now, in addition to the 5 Supreme Sword Scripture, Taishian Sword Scripture, No Return, etc., dozens of power of inheritance, such as Dongxian Green Lotus, Scripture of Herbs in Heaven, Scripture of Tranquility in Tripitaka, and so on, were constantly being integrated into a part of the Great Furnace Scripture. This was the Scripture. Only with a complete Emperor Scripture and the help of one's cultivation could one have the ability to comprehend immortality when he was in the Ancestor Realm. The most important thing now is to break through the realm. Only by breaking through the realm can I go further and live longer in the vast 1,000 battlefields. Otherwise, once I meet the ancestor of One Tao, I can only run away. Lin Sun's black eyes flashed with determination. Presently, his cultivation had already attained the extremes of the perfection stage of the heavenly lawless realm, and he only lacked a critical factor to advance to the void refinement realm. At that time, the increase in his cultivation would cause his combat strength to undergo a complete transformation. The gates of hell are not far ahead. Suddenly, Cyan Sparrow reminded. Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart. He abandoned all distracting thoughts and looked up. In the extremely distant black mist, there was a faint image of an enormous door. It connected the sky above and the earth below. Although it was faintly discernible, it seemed extremely lofty and mysterious. Gates of Hell. It was rumored that the Nether Realm was a terrifying place in the underworld. Once one entered this place, one's soul would not return. Of course, this was a rumor that only occurred during the last era. When Lin Sun approached it carefully, he saw that the Gate of Hell was actually a huge black gate, like a gate of heaven across heaven and earth. The stone pillars on both sides were several hundred meters thick, and the stone pillars were inscribed with mottled patterns of clouds. After experiencing the corrosion of countless years, they had long been damaged and incomplete. And on the beam of the door that was extremely high up, there were 2 large words inscribed with strange black Tao runes. Hellgate. Just looking at it would cause one's heart to palpitate. Once you enter this gate, you will not only be attacked by the underworld soldiers and generals, but you will also be attacked by the Een Thunder of the 6 clans. Cyan Sparrow reminded. The so-called Een Thunder of the 6 clans referred to 6 types of thunderbolts that were filled with strange power. It was rumored that only the Netherworld would produce such a terrible disaster. These 6 types of thunderbolts were Azura Blood Thunder, Absolute Thunder of Destiny, Human Soul Thunder, Evil Spirit Thunder, Hell Thunder, and Animal True Thunder. Azura, Destiny, Human Soul, evil spirit, hell, and animal corresponded to the 6 clans of the Netherworld in the last era. Then, Cyan Sparrow gave Lin Sun some advice on the terror of the Een Thunder of the 6 clans. Lin Sun almost laughed out loud when he heard that even emperors would be struck by the animal True Thunder, unable to recover their true form. Thinking about it, a group of Emperor Realm figures suddenly turn into livestock like pigs, cows, and sheep. This scene was absolutely amazing. Lin Sun could not help but recall the scene when she once turned a group of sages into a flock of sheep in the ancient Desolation domain. Don't laugh. If you become an animal, I'm afraid you won't be able to cry even if you want to, Cyan Sparrow snorted coldly. Lin Sun was stunned, and a layer of goosebumps appeared all over his body. If that was really the case, just thinking about it made his hair stand on end. By the way, didn't you say that there is a mysterious forbidden area near the gates of hell? Lin Sun thought of something. Cyan Sparrow said, after entering the gates of hell, there's a broken tablet with 2 words Yama written on it. The mysterious forbidden area is deep in the east of the tablet. Yama? Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. What kind of danger is in that mysterious forbidden area? A kind of order power that also collapsed and exploded after the destruction of the last era. It is like a burning black flame, immortal and indestructible. It is also called Nirvana Fire of Order. Cyan Sparrow said in a low voice, in the past, there was a real ancestor of one Tao who went there to investigate, but he encountered unknown dangers. At the moment he escaped, his whole body was covered by the Nirvana Fire of Order. In the blink of an eye, his soul was destroyed and turned into ashes. It is also because of this that people realize that the danger in this mysterious forbidden area is enough to kill the ancestor of one Tao. Lin Sun could not help but be shocked and narrowed his eyes. Since it is so dangerous, why do you still suggest me to go there? Because there are 2 kinds of order power in your life weapon, which is enough to resist the power of the Nirvana Fire of Order. If you can collect some of this fire, you can even threaten the immortals. As soon as Cyan Sparrow said this, Lin Sun could not help but be moved. Only then did he realize what opportunity Cyan Sparrow mentioned. Cyan Sparrow continued, of course, this is just my speculation. It doesn't matter if you really don't want to go. After all, that damn place is really too dangerous. Lin Sun's eyes flickered. After a moment of silence, he said, let's go and have a look first. He started to walk towards the gates of hell. When his figure had just arrived before the gates of hell, the order of Nirvana within the abyssal sword cauldron suddenly appeared. After that, it released a gorgeous rain of Nirvana light that covered the enormous stone pillars on both sides and the extremely high beams of the door. It has discovered another energy that can be absorbed and refined. Cyan Sparrow was stunned. Lin Sun was slightly surprised as well, but he quickly felt anticipation in his heart. Not long after, the Order of Nirvana withdrew its light and returned to the abyssal sword cauldron. Lin Sun's divine sense entered it right away, and he sensed it slightly. Instantly, he saw that within the world of the Order of Nirvana, there was a gates of hell that connected the 9 heavens and the 9 underworlds within the netherworld. Obviously, the energy that was absorbed and refined by the Order of Nirvana earlier was a part of the netherworld. However, there wasn't much change to the abyssal sword cauldron this time. Only one of the 9 netherworld Tao markings had instantly become complete and clear. When Lin Sun sensed it, a strange profundity of the great Tao instantly surged into his heart. After a long time, Lin Sun finally understood that this netherworld Tao marking was branded with a complete netherworld grand Tao, and it was called the Soul Retraction Tao. This Tao was divided into 2 parts, soul retraction and soul retraction. The energy of soul retraction was capable of drawing out the souls of the deceased, damaged souls, souls, heroic souls. Every single soul that was drawn out would be refined into pure soul energy, and it could be utilized to nurture and cultivate the strength of one soul. Soul retraction was an even more overbearing force. In battle, it was like holding on to shackles, and it was capable of forcefully restraining the soul of one's opponent. Most miraculous of it all was that the soul retraction Tao wasn't a secret technique, but a grand Tao law. After one cultivated and grasped it, one could transform it into a part of one's own cultivation. In this way, this energy could be utilized in various combat techniques. After he understood all of this, Lin Sun couldn't help but exclaim with admiration in his heart. What a soul retraction Tao! I really wonder how terrifying the netherworld was in the last era to actually be able to possess such a mysterious and overbearing energy of the Grand Tao. At the same time, Lin Sun also realized that this Tao was probably inextricably linked to the gates of hell. No matter whether it was soul retraction or soul retraction, it was all for the sake of bringing them to the gates of hell for the sake of trial and judgment, and then the 6 paths of hell would deal with them. Lin Sun couldn't help but be slightly curious. There are 9 netherworld Tao markings, and one of them is the soul retraction Tao. Then what are the other 8? Unfortunately, these 8 netherworld Tao markings weren't complete, and if he wanted to understand the mysteries within, he could only slowly gather energy to explore them. Let's go quickly, Green Sparrow urged. It could tell at a glance that Lin Sun must have obtained a great harvest, and this made its heart itch. However, it was also clear that Lin Sun would never reveal it. Lin Sun nodded and secretly instructed Green, with Taoist physique, to start comprehending the soul retraction Tao. Only then did he stride forward. After passing through the gates of hell, Lin Sun walked with extreme caution on the rest of the way, for fear that a bolt of animal true thunder would fall and strike him. After advancing for less than 1.5 kilometers, a netherworld general suddenly led a group of netherworld soldiers out of the rolling black fog, and they charged towards Lin Sun. How could Lin Sun be polite? He leaped up, and in a flash he killed all the ferocious creatures and easily obtained another underworld pearl. However, when Lin Sun was just about to size up the changes of the 9 netherworld Tao markings, suddenly a blood-red thunderbolt appeared soundlessly, and it tore through the void and struck towards Lin Sun. From the beginning to the end, it didn't make a single sound. Even its speed was unbelievably fast. Caught off guard, Lin Sun could only use the Abyssal Sword Cauldron to meet it head-on. Bang! The Abyssal Sword Cauldron shook violently, and it emitted a rumbling sound. A blood-red thunderbolt burst out and spread, and it shook Lin Sun's figure to the point that he staggered back, and his chi and blood surged. He couldn't help but be shocked. This thunderbolt was too powerful. This kind of power was even stronger than the 9 realms' ancestors, and it was extremely strange. It appeared soundlessly and abruptly, and it was impossible to guard against it. Without waiting for Lin Sun to have a chance to think, the black fog once again silently flashed out bolts of thunderbolts that glowed with a demonic blood-red light. P.S. Additional updates are sent. It's the end of the month. Kids can see if there are any monthly tickets left. Chapter 25-24. A small mistake was corrected. The Ghost General in the previous update should be Yama. 1, 10, 50. More and more blood-red thunderbolts appeared silently. Some were as thick as pythons, and some were as thin as swords, but none of them made any sound or breath. It was extremely weird. Lin Sun was horrified and ran away at once. Bang! 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 The Abyssal Sword Cauldron, which was defending Lin Sun, was hit by a giant hammer again and again, producing a violent roar. Lin Sun was so shocked that he almost coughed up blood. His face changed. Without any hesitation, he ran with all his strength. Looking from afar, the dense blood-red thunderbolts were chasing after Lin Sun like sharks smelling blood. The Abyssal Sword Cauldron was constantly bursting with dazzling electric arcs. After a while, the blood-red thunderbolts in the black mist finally disappeared. Lin Sun's face was a little pale, and his eyes were full of solemnity. He had a feeling of surviving a disaster. The power of the blood-red thunderbolts was so mysterious and terrible. This is Azura Bloody Thunder, one of the 6 lords of Een Thunder. If you are shrouded and besieged by it, even the 9th realm ancestors will suffer. Cyan Sparrow had a strange look in her eyes. However, as far as I know, Azura Bloody Thunder has only appeared a few times in the past countless years. No one has ever encountered it in tens of thousands of years. Who would have thought that you would encounter it? So, I'm quite lucky. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Cyan Sparrow sneered. I'm afraid only unlucky guys like you will think so. Lin Sun also laughed. At least, others have no chance to see what Azura Bloody Thunder is. For me, this trip is worthwhile. Do you want to see the animal true thunder? Cyan Sparrow said maliciously. Lin Sun's face darkened, and he shook his head decisively. Then, he continued to walk for about 7 miles, and finally saw the broken tablet mentioned by Cyan Sparrow. On one side of the road to the underworld, there was a 3-foot-high broken tablet. It was as black as ink and full of mottled traces of time. In the center of the tablet, 2 strange inscriptions, Yama, could be vaguely seen. Lin Sun said, "The mysterious forbidden area is deep on the side of this broken tablet." Qin Kei nodded and said, "Do you really plan to go there?" "There's no harm in giving it a try. If things go south, I'll just run away immediately." Lin Sun's black eyes flickered. Presently, his strongest trump card was the passing restriction divine ability, but he would absolutely not utilize it unless it was a matter of life and death. If someone were to notice it, it would definitely lead to an unpredictable disaster. After all, the forbidden death divine ability came from the inborn ability of Abyss Devouring Universe, and there were quite a number of people in the eternal true world who knew about this inborn ability. Once it was seen by others and leaked out, the Luo family would come looking for them immediately. Although his other trump cards were powerful, none of them could threaten the One Dao Ancestor's trump card. This inevitably made Lin Sun feel a sense of crisis. He was sure that a terrifying existence like the One Dao Ancestor would appear in the Great Thousand Battles domain. So, if he was able to gather some Nirvana Flames of Order, then it would be equivalent to possessing a trump card that could deter the Dao Ancestor. This was the reason why Lin Sun planned to explore it. Then you have to be careful. Qin Kei's voice also became serious. There were many mysterious forbidden areas in the Great Thousand Battles domain. Since ancient times, very few people dared to enter this mysterious, forbidden area. Lin Sun nodded and operated his cultivation to its peak state. Then he took out the abyssal sword cauldron and walked towards the side of the Yama King's tablet. The world here was completely filled with black fog. It was silent, and even the sound of the wind stopped. Even if Lin Sun used the third eye to explore, he could only see the scene within a range of thousands of feet. As he gradually went deeper, an indescribable feeling of oppression and throbbing surged through his body, causing his muscles to tense up. It seemed as if a lethal and ferocious being was hidden within the depths of the pitch-black mist. Lin Sun's expression also became solemn. He walked forward step by step, not daring to rush recklessly. The dim purple sun quietly submerged in the clouds. Unknowingly, a scarlet blood moon quietly hung under the sky, filled with black fog, emitting a demonic bloodlight. Lin Sun looked up at the scarlet blood moon and felt an inexplicable chill in his heart. Suddenly, whoosh, 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 numerous black dots suddenly surged into appearance in the pitch-black sky, and they converged densely beneath the blood-red moon. In the time of a few breaths, no less than 1,000 had converged here. Upon closer inspection, they were actually ferocious ghosts with ghastly pale faces and crimson eyes that were condensed from the black mist. In the center, a giant blood-colored skull floated. The skeleton was crystalline and snow-white, and it was large like a hill. Its teeth were sharp like numerous blades that stood on end, whereas 2 balls of green and glossy ghost flames burned where its eyes should be, and the flames shot into the sky and dyed the sky in a ghastly green glow. As soon as this enormous blood-red skull appeared beneath the sky, over 1,000 blood-robed ghosts kowtowed successively and prostrated themselves in worship. All of them emanated waves of obscure and sharpy sounds that surged through the heavens and the earth, and it was extremely shocking. Ghosts worshipping the moon. Lin Sun's expression became unprecedentedly solemn. This strange and gloomy scene even made him have the impulse to turn around and leave. Ghosts worshipping the moon. This is a great omen. Cyan Sparrow's voice transmission also revealed a sense of horror. It was rumored that in the netherworld of the last era, when ghosts worshipped the moon, it often meant that a ghost emperor was about to be born. This was an extremely terrible omen. When a ghost emperor appeared, it meant that a great disaster would occur in the netherworld. This was like a kind of omen. It had been spread in the netherworld since ancient times, and there was a saying that when a ghost emperor appeared, disaster would come. Bang, bang, bang. In the sky, numerous strands of jade-green ghost flames surged into appearance on the bodies of the 1,000-plus spirits, and they incinerated themselves. Their entire bodies dispersed and transformed into strands of abundant netherworld energy that surged into the mouth of the enormous skull at the center. It felt like they were sacrificing their own strength to the skull. At the same time, a thick, blood-colored pillar of light surged out from the blood-colored moon in the sky and poured into the giant skeleton. In just a moment, the entire heavens and the earth were surging with the blood-colored netherworld energy that surged like tempestuous waves. In the center of the energy was the skull. It was devouring this power and was undergoing a shocking transformation. "Go," Cyan Sparrow reminded quickly, seeming to realize that something was wrong. Lin Sun also nodded. At this moment, a shining black and white jade book suddenly shot out from the depths of the black mist. In the blink of an eye, it shot towards the huge blood-colored skull. Clatter, the jade book released two kinds of divine lights, black and white, which were dreamy and mysterious. Seeing this, the bloody skull made a grim and cold voice. "King Qin Guang, the era is about to end, and the netherworld will eventually cease to exist. Why do you still stop me?" Boom! A bloody light sprayed out from the skull's mouth and collided with the black and white divine lights, producing an earth-shaking roar. The black and white jade book also hummed and collapsed into a rain of light, disappearing. Silently, a vague illusory figure emerged from the depths of the black mist. He was extremely majestic, wearing a crown and a black robe. When Lin Sun looked at him, he felt that the figure's eyes seemed to be able to reflect the universe, the sun, the moon, and the stars, containing all the heavens and developing unpredictable secrets. Just a glance made Lin Sun's divine soul produce a suffocating pressure. But after the majestic figure appeared, he didn't seem to notice Lin Sun. He just stared at the bloody skull and said indifferently, "Even if the era is about to end, I won't allow you to disturb the order of the netherworld." The bloody skull grinned grimly. The next moment, figure after figure appeared successively from the nearby black mist. Some had strange appearances, some had refined appearances, some were mighty and terrifying, some were indifferent and composed. Even though their appearances were different, their imposing auras were undoubtedly formidable to the extreme. The bloody skull seemed to be shocked and said in a hoarse voice, "Emperor Song, King Chujiang, King Bianqing, King Taishan. Well, in order to stop me from transforming, you 10 kings of hell have come together." It seemed to be a little crazy and roared. "But have you ever thought that this era has come to an end and is about to be destroyed? Even if you can stop me, you will die in the destruction of the era." The voice resounded through the world, shook the clouds in all directions, and the mist tumbled violently. Lin Sun only felt that his head was buzzing, and he almost coughed up blood. And what answered the bloody skull was the joint action of the 10 kings of hell. Then, 10 majestic figures each stood in a corner. Some were holding Taoist books, some were holding swords, some were holding flags, some were holding bronze cauldrons, and some were holding dim yellow seals. Suppress, freeze, bind, trap, confront, kill. Divine voices roared one after another, as if the gods had issued a decree, shaking the world. Rumble. Various terrifying treasured lights of the great Tao covered the heavens and the earth, and it revealed boundless, terrifying phenomena. There were purgatory of blood, 6 paths of soul suppression, river of bitterness, permitha, oblivion. For a time, Lin Sun felt a stabbing pain in his eyes, and his mind trembled as if he was abandoned by the heavens and the earth. After an unknown period of time, Lin Sun gradually came back to his senses from the blank state, and his vision gradually became clear. But when he looked at the battlefield, he noticed to his shock that the black mist was suffused, the heavens and the earth were silent, and there was no scarlet blood moon in the sky. It seemed as if everything that happened just now was like an illusion. Battle brand. Lin Sun instantly realized that the scene he saw just now wasn't an illusion, but a shocking battle that really occurred in the last era. And what he saw was the fragments of the brand left behind by this battle. When he thought of this, Lin Sun's heart became even more restless. After countless years, the last era had been destroyed a long time ago. But in this mysterious, forbidden area, he'd inadvertently caught a glimpse of a terrifying and supreme battle. Even though it was merely a fragment, it was enough to show how powerful the Yamakings of the 10 palaces who presided over the netherworld were. Chapter 25:25. What I saw just now was indeed a battle mark, Cyan Sparrow said after a long time. Apparently, she had just calmed down from the shock. Why don't we leave? Cyan Sparrow suggested. Lin Sun shook his head with his dark eyes. Since we are already here, it would be a pity if we don't see the nirvana fire of order. As he said, he continued to move forward. Cyan Sparrow suddenly regretted instigating Lin Sun to come here. This place was obviously a place of great evil. Even a slight accident was very likely to cause a disaster. But Cyan Sparrow couldn't dissuade Lin Sun. She could see that Lin Sun had made up his mind. The deeper they went, the thicker the black mist was. It was quiet without any sound. With the help of Third Eye, Lin Sun saw many broken tiles and some broken and blackened bones scattered on the ground. They were so rotten that they would turn into flying ash and dissipate at the slightest touch. This made Lin Sun judge that in the last era, it was very likely that there were many buildings here and some creatures lived here. He couldn't find out anything else. Just like that, they traveled for an entire few tens of kilometers. All along the way, they actually didn't encounter even a trace of danger, and it seemed to be extremely peaceful. But Lin Sun could still keenly feel that the suffocating atmosphere became more and more intense as they went deeper, which made his hair stand on end. Why haven't I seen the nirvana fire of order you mentioned? Lin Sun couldn't help asking. Cyan Sparrow was about to answer. Suddenly, an enormous black figure appeared in the depths of the black mist. It stood there like a towering mountain. Lin Sun was shocked and stopped immediately. When he looked carefully, he was shocked to discover that the huge black shadow was actually a furnace. It was dozens of feet high, covered with mottled corrosion marks, and surrounded by black mist, which made it quite mysterious. Lin Sun thought for a while, gritted his teeth, and walked forward immediately. When he got closer, he found that the furnace had been seriously corroded and would turn into debris and dissipate at any time. On the surface of the furnace, some vague cloud patterns could be vaguely seen, but he couldn't tell what they were exactly. At this moment, the nirvana fire of order swept out again, emitting Taoist light that covered the huge furnace. Both Lin Sun and Cyan Sparrow were stunned. After that, they came to an understanding in their hearts. This furnace is probably branded with some secrets related to the Netherhell from the last era. Sure enough, as Lin Sun guessed, after a while, when the Nirvana order returned, there were 10 Yama halls in the Netherworld in its order world. Every Yin Luo Jian had a different style and a different plaque hung on it. They were King Qin Guang Palace, King Chu Jiang Palace, King Song Emperor Palace, King Corner Palace, King Yama Palace, King Biansheng Palace, King Taishan Palace, King Dudu Palace, King Equality Palace, King Chakravarti Palace. With the appearance of the 10 Yama halls, Lin Sun also noticed that one of the 9 Nether Dao patterns became complete and clear in an instant. His divine sense entered it, and instantly, strands of strange and miraculous profundities of the Grand Dao surged into his heart. Yama King of 10 Directions Dao, a miraculous and unfathomable Grand Dao of the Netherworld, was divided into 10 branches, and all of them were related to punishment and slaughter. For example, The Mirror of Sin Dao was a grand Dao controlled by King Qin Guang, and it was capable of seeing through the energy of sin. When cultivated to the limit, the energy of the grand Dao would condense into a strange diagram that was like the book of life and death. For example, the Sea of Misery Dao was controlled by King Chu Jiang, and it was a Dao of punishment. When cultivated to the limit, one could condense a diagram of a sea of misery. For example, the Flame Illumination Dao was controlled by King Song Emperor, and it was a Dao of suppression and restraint. When cultivated to the limit, one could condense a diagram of a sea of misery. The other branches of the Grand Dao each had their own profundities and might. These 10 types of Grand Dao had jointly formed the 10 Yama paths. Lin Sun couldn't help but exclaim with admiration in his heart when he found out about all of this. Compared to the soul restraint Dao that came from the gates of hell, the 10 Yama paths that came from the 10 Yama kings were undoubtedly even more complicated and obscure, and it possessed various strange might that was extremely shocking. This caused Lin Sun to not dare imagine exactly how extraordinary the nether hell of the last era was. It was actually capable of controlling so many unimaginable grand Dao energies. If it wasn't for the Nirvana order possessing the miraculous effect of reconstruction and rebirth, causing the soul restraint Dao and 10 Yama paths to be reconstructed and revealed, it would probably be impossible for him to understand these profundities in his entire lifetime. Another great gain, the Green Sparrow muttered, and she seemed to be slightly jealous. After traversing the bridge of helplessness, traversing the gates of hell, and now encountering this cauldron, Lin Sun obtained something every single time. So how could the Green Sparrow maintain her composure? In the past, the Green Sparrow had never heard of any cultivator obtaining fortuitous encounters repeatedly in the ghastly underworld like Lin Sun had. However, the Green Sparrow was clearly aware that all of this was probably related to the mysterious energy of order within Lin Sun's abyssal sword cauldron. The energy of order was too unbelievable. It was capable of reconstructing the energy of order that had been annihilated in the last era, allowing it to undergo rebirth in this era and emerge once more. However, the Green Sparrow was completely unaware of exactly how much benefit Lin Sun had obtained from it, and this was precisely the reason why she felt indignant, envious, and jealous. It's not a great gain, but it's a little incredible. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. He didn't see the Nirvana fire of order, but on the contrary, he obtained the 10 directions Yamatao of the last era, which was indeed beyond his expectation. The Green Sparrow said, "Quit while you're ahead. You'd better leave quickly." Looking at the model cauldron, Lin Sun said casually, "What do you think is inside this cauldron?" The Green Sparrow was stunned. Lin Sun had already leaped up into the air, came to the top of the cauldron, and looked down. Although he had restrained his strength and tried to be as careful as possible, he still emitted some fluctuations of power when he leaped up into the air. Suddenly, as if the cauldron had been disturbed, a terrifying and boundless destructive aura was suddenly released from it. Boom! In an instant, the mottled and decayed cauldron exploded, and endless dazzling black flames rose into the sky. With a bang, Lin Sun was directly shaken and flew out. His whole body was penetrated, and his hair and skin felt a kind of burning pain. He couldn't help but be shocked. With his current cultivation, he hadn't been so embarrassed for a long time. In the distance, a ray of flaming light that was like a divine chain of order shot through the heavens and the earth, and it emanated boundlessly brilliant light. The scorching torrent of destruction vaporized the black mist that covered the surroundings, and even space itself was burned red. The Nirvana fire of order. The Green Sparrow shouted. Lin Sun was also shocked. It turned out that this was the terrible fire that could easily kill a Tao ancestor. Before he could think more, the Nirvana fire of order, like a wildly dancing whip, lashed at him fiercely. Boom! The flames were monstrous. Wherever the Nirvana fire of order passed, the world seemed to be incinerated, and everything was destroyed. The terrible destructive aura made Lin Sun's face change. Whoosh! Without hesitation, he turned around and fled. Originally, Lin Sun planned to suppress some nirvana fire of order with the power of the abyssal sword cauldron, but seeing such a scene, he gave up directly. That kind of power was too terrible, as if a slight touch would instantly turn him into ashes. Oh no! Suddenly, Lin Sun's heart beat fiercely, and he subconsciously dodged to one side. In the direction of his original escape, a wisp of nirvana fire of order suddenly gushed out, as if it had been buried there for a long time. If he hadn't dodged in time, he might have bumped into it. Lin Sun couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. This thing was too strange. He didn't dare to stay and continued to escape. But just a moment later, Lin Sun's face became ugly. It turned out that in all directions of this area filled with black mist, wisps of nirvana fire of order had already been surrounded by it. Each wisp of nirvana fire of order was different. Some were as thick as pythons and bright, illuminating the mountains and rivers. Some were as slender as sword chi, flickering and wandering, erratic, strange, and unpredictable. But no matter what, these nirvana fire of order, as if they had intelligence, turned into a huge flame circle surrounding the area around Lin Sun. And it was constantly shrinking and approaching. It was really a hopeless situation. Between advancing and retreating, it was inevitable that he would come into direct contact with these terrible flames. "It's over," Cyan Sparrow wailed. "If you had listened to me earlier, you wouldn't have fallen into such a dangerous situation." Lin Sun had no time to pay attention to Cyan Sparrow. He took a deep breath and completely calmed down. Whoosh! Suddenly, he moved in the void and rushed towards a wisp of nirvana fire of order that was as slender as sword chi. The wisp of nirvana fire of order flashed strangely and disappeared. Lin Sun looked happy and was about to take this opportunity to escape from the encirclement. But the next moment, the joy on his face froze. Because on the way ahead, there appeared hundreds of wisps of nirvana fire of order, all as slender as sword chi, bright and dazzling. In other directions, various kinds of nirvana fire of order were also rushing towards him aggressively. Wherever they passed, the world was incinerated, and the flames were monstrous. "Fight!" Lin Sun gritted his teeth, launched Abyssal Sword Cauldron, and rushed straight forward. Bang! When the first wisp of nirvana fire of order hit Abyssal Sword Cauldron, a terrible destructive force spread, and Lin Sun almost coughed up blood. But he had no time to care about this. He ran all his strength, as if he was desperate, and finally resolved the power of the nirvana fire of order. But then, the dense nirvana fire of order in front of him rushed towards him. Bang! 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 The deafening explosion resounded through the world. Every collision sound was accompanied by the release of the terrible power of nirvana fire of order. All of a sudden, Abyssal Sword Cauldron trembled violently and buzzed. Even though Lin Sun had exhausted all his cultivation, his face was pale and he coughed up blood again and again. The most terrible thing was that the nirvana fire of order behind him had also rushed towards him. If it were any other practitioner, he would have been desperate. At this critical moment, Lin Sun suddenly let out a loud shout and exerted the forbidden passing spell. In a flash, the world seemed to be silent and stagnant. Lin Sun had already taken advantage of this moment to smash the Abyssal Sword Cauldron, and the nirvana fire of order in front of him was suddenly broken. Taking this opportunity, Lin Sun moved in the void and rushed forward. P.S. I will continue to add chapters tonight. Nothing else. I just want to add chapters. I will add chapters at about 10 p.m. Chapter 25-26. On the road to the underworld. Lin Sun fell to the ground, panting. His handsome face was ghastly pale and translucent, while a trace of blood still remained on the corner of his mouth, and his deep eyes were filled with terror and rejoicing. In order to break out of the encirclement, he used the forbidden passing twice in a row to escape from the quietus fire of order. But the price he paid was that he was seriously injured and his cultivation was on the verge of drying up. Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun took out some precious healing medicines and stuffed them into his mouth. He chewed and refined them at the same time. Yezi, Wu Kei, come and protect me. Lin Sun transmitted his voice. The road to the underworld was still not safe and full of danger. Soldiers and kings of hell could rush out at any time. Yezi and Wu Kei became vigilant after they came out. Over the years, Lin Sun had collected most of the useless sovereign weapons and left them to Yezi, Wu Kei, and Spirit of the Broken Blade as food. By now, their cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. In a one-on-one fight, each of them could pose a fatal threat to a practitioner at the 7th level of the Emperor realm. If they worked together, they could even fight against a 9th realm ancestor. It should be known that in the deity Phoenix realm, Yezi and the others had fought against a 9th realm ancestor from the White Tiger bloodline. It turns out that you've kept 2 spirits. The Green Sparrow was dumbfounded. Only now did it realize that Lin Sun actually had a lot of trump cards. Lin Sun did not say anything and began to meditate quietly. Since he entered the vast thousand battle domain, it was the first time that he had fallen into such a predicament. He used the forbidden passing twice in a row to save his life. This was something that was rarely seen in the past. When he thought of the scenes he had experienced before, Lin Sun still had a lingering fear in his heart. The power of the Nirvana Flame of Order was really too terrifying. No wonder even the ancestor of One Tao was easily killed. Its power was indeed sufficient to make any cultivator despair. In the following time, it was surprisingly calm. There was no accident. Not to mention the soldiers of hell, he did not even meet a practitioner. After a full day, Lin Sun woke up from meditation. His injuries had been completely healed, and even about 80% of his exhausted strength had been restored. It would not take long for him to completely return to his peak state. But Lin Sun did not intend to stay any longer. The longer it took, the less safe it would be. Yi and Wu Kei returned to Reincarnation Sword Sheath and Insignificant Bow respectively. Lin immediately decided to move on. Inside his body, the Greenwood Taoist body and the Scarlet Fire Taoist body were respectively comprehending the Soul Reaper Tao and the 10 Directions Yama Tao. In fact, with Lin Sun's current cultivation and realm, it was not difficult for him to comprehend the great way of the netherworld, which belonged to the last era. Just like now, he had already comprehended the profound mysteries of the Tao of Soul Hunter to the extent of achieving a small level of mastery. However, it would still take a period of time to refine the netherworld Great Tao to the level of Emperor Realm laws. Have you obtained the Nirvana Flames of Order? On the way, the Green Sparrow couldn't help but ask. Lin Sun smiled. He knew Green Sparrow would be curious. Got it. He nodded. When he was escaping earlier, he used the Abyssal Sword Cauldron to suppress more than a dozen flames of order that were as thin as sword chi. When these flames of order were about to struggle, they had already been suppressed by the Orderly Phoenix Flames and Nirvana Flames of Order. Instantly, they could no longer move and were trapped in the Sword Cauldron. Really? The Green Sparrow let out a cry of surprise and became extremely excited. This is a terrifying flame that can threaten the immortals. It can actually be suppressed and subdued. It was all too clear about the details of the Nirvana Flames of Order. After the destruction of the last era, the power of order collapsed and sank, turning into an immortal black flame, which was called the Nirvana Flames of Order. In the past years, there was once a Tao ancestor who was burned alive by this flame. As a result, the mysterious forbidden area near the Yama Tablet was also regarded as a place of great danger. For countless years, no one dared to step into it. Even the Green Sparrow didn't expect that Lin Sun, who had fled in such a sorry state, not only survived, but also collected this flame. I could not be shocked. Can I have a look? The Green Sparrow asked expectantly. Sure, but are you sure you're not afraid of being roasted? Lin Sun said. The Green Sparrow immediately rolled its eyes and extinguished this idea. Next, how long do we have to walk to reach the first immortal pass? Lin Sun asked. The Green Sparrow pondered and said, in less than a month. After that, it guided Chen Shi. I'm able to discern that you're not far from breaking through. However, I suggest that you do so after you arrive at the Pass of Eternity, because that place is undoubtedly the safest and no one would dare to act wantonly there. Lin Sun was surprised and said, "Is it the same as the rules in the city of extradition?" "Almost." Lin Sun nodded. Not long after, on the road ahead, a king of hell led hundreds of netherworld soldiers, rushing towards Lin Sun aggressively. Lin Sun was not surprised, but this time he secretly operated the power of the soul capture doctrine that he had just comprehended and used it to control the abyssal sword cauldron. Rumble, as the abyssal sword cauldron smashed down, more than a dozen netherworld soldiers instantly exploded and turned into rolling black mist. But unlike before, as the abyssal sword cauldron surged with the power of the soul capture doctrine, almost illusory figures were extracted from the black mist and suppressed into the abyssal sword cauldron. Immediately, Lin Sun noticed that the illusory figures were actually fragmented and blurred soul power. After being washed by the power of the soul capture doctrine, the soul power condensed and turned into a crystal bead the size of a broad bean. As expected, the power of the soul capture doctrine naturally restrains these netherworld soldiers. I can easily suppress and kill them, extract their soul power, and collect them. Lin Sun's spirit was lifted. The soul capture doctrine was divided into two parts, the guiding doctrine and the soul capture doctrine. It could collect all kinds of souls, and after refining, it could be turned into pure soul power, which was extremely useful for cultivators to cultivate their soul power. After these netherworld soldiers were killed, the rolling black mist was turned into the netherworld power, which was absorbed by the abyssal sword cauldron. Although the netherworld power formed by these netherworld soldiers was far from enough to condense the 9 netherworld Tao patterns. But because he could collect soul power, Lin Sun did not intend to let these netherworld soldiers go this time. Boom! The battle broke out. Lin Sun galloped through the army of hundreds of netherworld soldiers. He was invincible all the way. Even the underworld king was killed by Lin Sun with absolute power. Just a moment later, all the enemies in the field were wiped out. Lin Sun counted and found that the soul bead the size of a broad bean had become 3 fist-sized soul beads in the abyssal sword cauldron. One of them was condensed by the soul power of the underworld king. At the same time, there was also an underworld pearl. Together with the netherworld power collected, the remaining 7 netherworld Tao patterns had some subtle changes. Lin Sun could not help but be quite satisfied with such a harvest. Lin Sun didn't even dare to imagine that he could collect soul power, the power of the netherworld, and the underworld pearl. Cyan Sparrow was too tired to complain about it. She was full of envy and jealousy. In the past, Green Sparrow had never even heard of such a method of harvesting spoils of war, let alone seen it. Cyan Sparrow was sure that among all the practitioners who had entered the Sinluo underworld since ancient times, Lin Sun was the only one who had such an incredible encounter. Cyan Sparrow knew that all this had something to do with the mysterious power of order that Lin Sun controlled. There was no more fatal danger on the way, nor did he encounter the horrible killing tribulations like the quietus fire of order. Every once in a while, groups of netherworld soldiers would come out. Sometimes, Underworld King would lead a group of netherworld soldiers to fight. The scale was huge and the lineup was strong. But without exception, they were all regarded by Lin Sun as glittering fat prey and hunted down. This also made the number of soul beads he collected increase rapidly. The number of underworld pearl was also increasing. The 9 netherworld Tao patterns absorbed more and more netherworld power. Along the way, Lin Sun was very proud of his success. With a kind of expectation and high-spirited mood, he overcame all the difficulties along the way. Cyan Sparrow couldn't stand it anymore. She couldn't help thinking in her heart that these netherworld soldiers were really stupid. Didn't they know that in Lin Sun's eyes, they were a group of fat pigs? Time passed day by day. All the practitioners who entered the Sinluo underworld and walked behind Lin Sun were confused no matter how far they were. All along the way, they were filled with fear and anxiety, and their minds were strained. They were deeply afraid of encountering a terrifying calamity, so they were extremely careful. But they didn't expect that they could rarely encounter the terrifying netherworld soldiers and netherworld kings. Occasionally, they could barely meet some netherworld soldiers, but most of them were not a threat at all. Therefore, although they walked cautiously along the way, they almost didn't encounter any danger or threat. What's going on? Many people were confused. Could it be that luck has taken a turn for the better, and the heavens have shown their favor to us? Someone couldn't help murmuring. Or, there's already a peerlessly ruthless person ahead and killed all the netherworld soldiers along the way. Some people guessed and doubted. It's definitely that good guy. As for Tantai, Feng, and the others, they had a strong premonition that all of this was definitely done by Ling Xuanzi. For a time, all of them sighed with emotion. What a good person! How many good people were there in the world who were willing to help others regardless of their gains and losses? If Lin Sun knew this, he probably wouldn't know whether to laugh or cry. More than 20 days later, the black mist that covered the nether path gradually became sparse, and the oppressive and gloomy aura dissipated a lot. Lin Sun, who was trudging all the way, finally saw a black Taoist altar that was shaped like a wheel at the end of the nether path, and obscure spatial fluctuations surged on the Taoist altar. Once you step on this Taoist altar, you'll be teleported to the first immortal pass. That place is an enormous city that has existed since ancient times, and it has been controlled by different immortal emperor clans in turn for countless years. Cyan Sparrow's voice was relaxed. So long as you enter it, you can have a good rest. I'm sending you more updates. Chapter 25-27. There were 49 immortal heavenly passes in the vast thousand battle domain. Outside the Sinluo underworld was the first immortal pass, also known as the starting city. It implied that only those who entered this place were qualified to embark on the next journey. The rules of the starting city are very simple. All killing is forbidden. Those who violate the rules only have two choices. One is death. The other is to be planted with the curse of utter despair and become a guard of the city. They will never be able to escape. Cyan Sparrow pointed out, "You've already seen the power of the curse of utter despair. Your two friends' life spirits were controlled by this curse. If so, they are no different from being slaves. It's better to be killed." Lin Sun listened silently. If I'm not mistaken, the faction guarding the city gate is from the Hung clan of the Immortal Emperor clan. There's definitely a Dao ancestor guarding the city gate. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to intimidate the martial emperors that entered the city. Cyan Sparrow said casually. As for other things, you'll know when you enter the city. Lin Sun nodded and went straight to the black altar shaped like a wheel. With a wave of space fluctuation, Lin Sun's figure suddenly disappeared. The world was boundless and the mountains were layered. At this moment, Lin Sun stood in front of a majestic ancient city. Compared to the modeled city wall that was thousands of meters high, he looked extremely small. It was impossible to tell how big the city was from here, but he could clearly feel the vicissitudes of time. Lin Sun turned his head and saw the mountains covered in clouds and mist. The rolling mountains stretched as far as the eye could see. Outside the starting city is a dangerous place full of strange and unpredictable dangers. I advise you to enter the city as soon as possible. Don't wander around. Cyan Sparrow reminded Lin Sun. It had already returned to the sachet, saying that it was worried that its identity would be exposed and bring unnecessary trouble to Lin Sun. Lin Sun nodded and looked at the majestic city again. The city wall was covered with knife marks, sword holes, and mottled with ancient relics. It was difficult to hide the heavy atmosphere of time, adding a kind of desolation. Vaguely, there were cryptic restrictions circulating. This was the first heaven pass of immortality in the vast thousand battle domain. Naturally, there would be formations engraved on the walls to protect the peace of this place. Even after so many killing tribulations, this place was still imperishable. The majestic and ancient city gate was made of a rare greenish-black stone. Two teams of guards were stationed on both sides of the gate. All of them were armed with weapons, and their figures and faces were covered in black armor. But based on the aura that suffused from their bodies, all of them were existences above the Emperor realm. His cultivation was between 3rd and 6th rank Emperor realm. Even so, it was still extremely shocking. After all, they were all great emperors. Yet today, they have become a group of guards before the Immortal Pass. According to the Cyan Sparrow, these were the people who had defied the order of the city in the past. Their life souls were imprisoned, and they could only be the guards of the city for eternity. There was only Lin Sun in front of the towering city gate, so he attracted the attention of the two teams of guards as soon as he appeared. Lin Sun remained calm and went straight forward. Identity nameplate. A tall and slender guard dressed in black armor and holding a bronze greatsword spoke with a piercingly cold, murderous aura. Lin Sun handed over the nameplate. The guard looked at it in his hand, then looked at Lin Sun and said, "Anyone who enters the city needs to pay 10,000 first-class Eternity Source Crystals. If it's not enough, you can exchange it with treasures." Before he finished speaking, Lin Sun had already thrown out a storage bag. The guard checked it, then looked at Lin Sun deeply and said, "It's done." As he said, he returned the nameplate to Lin Sun. Lin Sun nodded and walked straight into the city. Remember, no fighting or killing is allowed in the city. Otherwise, no matter who you are, you will pay an unbearable price. The cold voice of the guard came out. Lin Sun did not look back, and his figure quickly disappeared into the city gate. This person must be a powerful person to be able to go through the Sunluo underworld alone. The guards near the city gate discussed in a low voice. Only the guard who checked Lin Sun's nameplate waved his hand. Immediately, a slim guard approached. "Go to Sky Tower and find Lord Wenxiaoing. Tell him the target has appeared." "Yes." The slim guard left in a hurry. The city was huge, and the streets were incomparably wide. Ancient trees could be seen everywhere, holding up the canopy of the trees. Rows of ancient buildings were located in the streets and alleys. There were elixir shops, weapon shops, inns, restaurants, all kinds of things. The streets were crowded with pedestrians and carriages. All kinds of shouting and hawking could be heard one after another. It was noisy and lively. Lin Sun could not help but be surprised. Although the figures he saw along the way were from different races, most of them were below the Emperor realm. Some children who were playing and chasing on the streets had just set foot on the road of cultivation. This was unbelievable. One should know that this was the boundless thousand battlefield. To reach this city, one had to go through the ancient nightmare battlefield, the undead soul region, and the Sunluo underworld. There were dangers everywhere, and only a slim chance of survival. Emperor realm figures had to take great risks, but most of the creatures in this city were below the Emperor realm. How could it not be strange? Green Sparrow quickly gave the answer. In the past, when many Emperor realm figures came to the boundless thousand battlefield, they would put many of their relatives and clansmen into treasures they carried with them, intending to go to the eternal world together. But the journey was too dangerous, and these Emperor realm figures were worried that if they continued, they would most likely meet with misfortune. So they left their relatives and clansmen in the city. After countless changes over the years, the number of cultivators left in the city increased. They lived and multiplied in the city, which was why Lin Sun was seeing now. Lin Sun came to a sudden realization. This made sense. As he walked, he saw that everyone got along well and orderly, regardless of their cultivation. He did not see anyone who bullied the weak. This was quite similar to the scene in the city of extradition. Lin Sun wandered around the city alone, understanding the situation. Occasionally, he would raise his head to look at the sky. There was a mysterious screen of light that covered the entire city. Outside the screen was a boundless starry sky. The stars swayed in a circle in the sky, looking magnificent and mysterious. "Looks like I can really choose to break through here," Lin Sun said thoughtfully. Other places were too dangerous, and accidents could happen at any time. But in Origin City, there was clearly no need to worry about such problems. Before long, Lin Sun found Nin, and the waiter asked for 10 first-class Eternity Source Crystals. Lin Sun could not help but be stunned. The price here was too ridiculous. The waiter also explained that those who could stay in an inn in the city were all great emperors who did not lack money. Lin Sun could not help but laugh. But he did not lack money, so he left behind a bag of first-class Eternity Source Crystals and booked a room for 10 days. Lin Sun could not help but nod inwardly when he walked into the room. There were all sorts of intricate restrictive powers in the inn, so there was no need to worry about outsiders finding out. But Lin Sun still personally set up a restrictive power before lying down lazily on the bed and letting out a long, comfortable sigh. Ever since he entered the ancient nightmare battlefield, he had experienced countless killings and dangers, causing his mind to be constantly tense. It was only at this moment that he relaxed a lot. After a long while, Lin Sun suddenly said to himself, Mi Wuya and Yin Yu Ro are both in my pagoda. Under such circumstances, will Wen Xiaoheng be able to sense them? Green Sparrow said, the forbidden curse of absolute extinction is sensed through one's life spirit. The power of treasures cannot be isolated. In other words, if Wen Xiaoheng is an origin city, he will definitely sense your presence immediately. Lin Sun made a sound of acknowledgement and said, if a noble from the eternal true world like him violates the rules of the city, will he be punished? Green Sparrow thought about it and said, generally speaking, even the great figures of the eternal true world's immortal emperor clans rarely dare to attack in the city. But at some special times, even if they attack, they will find a sufficient reason. For example, scamming. Scamming? Lin Sun was stunned, a strange look in his eyes. Qin Ke said indifferently, if Wen Xiaoheng found some scapegoats to cause trouble for you, and you fought with the scapegoats, under such circumstances and the scapegoat said that you started it first, and there are many people who could prove this point, who do you think you would punish if you were the city lord? Lin Sun looked pensive and said, although this method is a little despicable, it is indeed the most direct and effective method. However, the key still depends on the city lord's attitude. If the city lord acquiesces to this matter, forget scamming. He can even kill you directly and frame you with a crime. Green Sparrow's voice was filled with ridicule. It is not an exaggeration to say that if the immortal emperor clans want to deal with someone from the boundless world like you, they have many ways to do so. However, under normal circumstances, no one will do such things in the open. Lin Sun thought about it and said, in other words, if they want to deal with someone, they will choose to do it in secret and not let the news leak out. Green Sparrow said, correct. However, under normal circumstances, this kind of thing rarely happens. After all, the reason why the Immortal Fortress can stand until now is because of the rules that have been passed down for countless years. Not anyone can break them easily. Even the Immortal Emperor clans that take turns to guard this city every once in a while don't dare to break the rules set by everyone. Lin Sun smiled. His black eyes were deep as he said slowly, but in my opinion, Wen Xiaoheng won't care about these rules. Then he slowly closed his eyes and started to doze off, looking very relaxed and satisfied. Green Sparrow thought about it and didn't comment. She knew how much Wen Xiaoheng hated Lin Sun. If he had enough confidence, he wouldn't hold back just because this was the Immortal Fortress. At the same time, on the highest floor of a towering building in the city, this was the Sky Tower, the tallest and most magnificent building in the Origin City. At this moment, Wen Xiaoheng was standing against the railing, wearing a long robe and carrying a sword. Looking into the distance, the huge city seemed to stretch endlessly, with cobweb-like streets, row upon row of buildings, bustling pedestrians. He could see most of the scenery. Chapter 25-28. Granny Shui stood to the side and looked at Wen Xiaoheng, who was leaning against the railing silently. She could not help but feel pity for him. After the crushing defeat, Wen Xiaoheng seemed to have changed into a different person. He had become taciturn, and no one knew what he was thinking. To Granny Shui, the crushing defeat was too great a blow to Wen Xiaoheng. It had become a sore spot in his heart. If he was not eliminated, his Dao heart would definitely be affected. A guard hurried over and stood in the distance. He bowed and cupped his fists, saying respectfully, "Milady, there's news from the city gate. Ling Xuanzi has entered the city." Granny Shui suddenly turned her head, her eyes flashing like lightning. She waved her hand and said, "Leave." The guard turned and left. Granny Shui took out a jade book with obscure ripples and flipped it open. She sensed it and immediately sensed that Mi Wuya and Yin Yuro's life souls were in a certain area of the city. She was delighted and full of energy. She looked at Wen Xiaoheng and said, "Young master, that vile spawn has indeed entered the city." But to Granny Shue's surprise, when Xiaoheng did not seem to have any reaction. His expression was calm and indifferent as he looked into the distance. "Young master?" she could not help but ask. "I understand." When Xiaoheng finally spoke, he turned to look at Granny Shui, his eyes filled with bone-chilling hatred and coldness. "I've already contacted the hidden space world. They will send an assassin to deal with that child. This is the hidden space token." As he spoke, he casually threw out a token. It was the size of a palm and as red as blood. A devilish silver vertical pupil appeared on the surface of the token. Granny Shui said in shock, "Young master, you agreed to the hidden space world's conditions?" When Xiaoheng said with an expressionless face, "You know as well that ordinary Ninth Realm ancestors aren't a match for Ling Xuanzi at all, and if you want to kill him in Origin City without anyone noticing, only an assassin from the hidden void world can do it. But the price is too great. That's 3 million first-class eternal void source crystals." Granny Shui could not calm down, and her emotions were in turmoil. 3 million first-class eternal void source crystals. Even in the eternal true world, it was a fortune that could move even a Dao ancestor. But now, Granny Shui felt that it wasn't worth it to pay such a price just to kill Ling Xuanzi. "As long as I can kill Ling Xuanzi, this price is worth it." When Xiaoheng spoke word by word, and his eyes were filled with coldness. "That old fellow, Heng Tianxua, has already agreed to close one eye on this matter. Let me see if Ling Xuanzi can walk out of Origin City alive." Heaven Traversing Peak. The immortal emperor ancestor was a great figure of the Heng family, a true ancestor of the Tao. He represented the Heng family and oversaw Origin City, holding the power of the city lord. Granny Shui took a deep breath. She knew that she could not persuade him any further, so she nodded in agreement. She probed the space concealment token with her divine sense, and immediately, the information of an assassin appeared. Crane. He was ranked 6th among the Emperor-rank assassins of the hidden space realm. Since the start of the mission, he had not failed once. In the past 1,000 years, he had carried out 18 9th-level Emperor-ranked missions and killed 18 9th-level ancestors. The following content was a detailed list of Crane's achievements, all of which were dazzling, causing Granny Snow to be shocked. 6th Emperor rank. No wonder the fee is so high. Granny Snow sighed in her heart. Hidden Void World was a mysterious force of assassins in the eternal true world, and even some of the immortal emperors were wary of them. City Lord's Mansion. In a simple and quiet courtyard, Heng Tianxua was holding a bone-patterned jade slip and studying it. He was dressed in a plain robe, and his face was as smooth as jade. Only his temples were white, adding an air of age to him. He sat there casually, exuding an elegant and tranquil air. From his appearance alone, it was difficult to tell that he was an old progenitor who had lived for tens of thousands of years. He was a true ancestor of the Tao. The trial secret realm will open in 3 months. I wonder how many emperors will survive this time. After a while, Heng Tianxua spoke softly, as if he was deep in thought. Shuffling footsteps came from afar, and Heng Tianxua immediately gathered his thoughts and asked, "Why have you come?" "My lord, we just received news that the target when Xiaoheng has targeted has entered the city," a boy with delicate features said softly. "That Ling Xuanzi?" Heng Tianxua asked. "Yes." Heng Tianxua smiled and waved his hand. "Go. Don't bother with this. If you cause any trouble, remember to suppress it. Don't disturb the order in the city." "Yes." The boy took the order and left. To be able to force one Xiaoheng, one of the 5 ultimate emperors of the One family, into such a mess, and even have to rely on the assassins of the Void World, this Ling Xuanzi is not an ordinary ruthless character. Heng Tianxua thought for a while and shook his head. Forget it. Since he has a grudge with the One family, let Wen Xiaoheng solve this matter. He no longer paid attention to this matter and continued to play with the bone-patterned jade slip in his hand, thinking about the trial secret realm. The night was as dark as ink. Lin Sun walked out of the inn and walked towards the brightly lit and bustling street with his hands behind his back. Buying starfrost, 9 stamen flowers, as many as you can. Hot golden scale meat buns, fresh and juicy, thin skin, can be called the best. Customer, do you want to buy some divine materials? These are all unique treasures in the boundless thousand battlefields, and it's difficult to find them in the outside world. All kinds of shouts and hawking sounded one after another. Lin Sun strolled along the way, and it was an eye-opener. Different from other places, the treasures sold in the city of origin were of all kinds, and they were all rare treasures that were rarely seen in the outside world. However, the prices were ridiculously high. Not long after, Lin Sun walked into a rather large treasure shop, and an attendant immediately came to greet him. "I need to buy some underworld pearls," said Lin Sun. The attendant was startled and said, "Senior, these treasures are extremely rare, and it's rare to find them. Even if someone could find them, they will rarely sell them. Do you have underworld pearls here?" Lin Sun asked directly. "Yes." The one who answered Lin Sun was a lean man, and he smiled and cupped his hands. "I'm Hung Yuntong, the manager of this shop." Surnamed Hung, Lin Sun immediately knew that this person in front of him must be a member of the Hung family of the Immortal Emperor family. "How many underworld pearls do you need?" Hung Yuntong asked with a smile. "As many as you have," Lin Sun said without hesitation. Hung Yuntong raised his eyebrows and said, "Do you know how much one underworld pearl is worth?" As he spoke, he extended 4 fingers and said, 400,000 high-grade eternity crystals. Lin Sun was surprised. "In the eternal world, it's worth only 300,000, right?" Hung Yuntong laughed. "This is not the eternal world, so the price of underworld pearls is naturally different." Lin Sun thought about it and said, "Then how many underworld pearls do you have?" 3. Hung Yuntong reported a number. After thinking about it, Lin Sun asked, "Can I exchange them with other items?" Hung Yuntong smiled and said, "Of course." Immediately, he brought Lin Sun into a quiet room that was isolated from the outside world. 15 minutes later, when Lin Sun walked out of the quiet room, the eternity crystals on him were all gone. Even the spoils of war that he had collected along the way were almost all gone. In exchange, he had only obtained 3 underworld pearls. This treasure was simply too expensive, and it could be said to be astronomical. After all, he had sold all kinds of treasures that he did not need at the 4 Supremes' house in the Guide City to exchange for 9,000 first-grade eternity crystals. If Lin Sun had not killed along the way and obtained a large number of spoils of war, he would not even be able to afford 1 underworld pearl. In the end, Hung Yuntong sent Lin Sun, the distinguished guest, out of the door with a smile on his face. It was not until Lin Sun's figure disappeared that he retracted his gaze, and a smile appeared on his lips. This Ling Xuanzi was indeed the guy who defeated Wen Shaoing. When he was counting and exchanging the treasures on Lin Sun, most of the spoils of war came from the emperors around Wen Shaoing, and many of the treasures had the unique brand of the Wen family. It was also because of this that Hung Yuntong was able to determine Lin Sun's identity. "When you die, perhaps I will go and collect your corpse. As for the treasures on you, take them as payment for collecting your corpse." Hung Yuntong's imagination ran wild. After returning to the inn, Lin Sun casually set up a restrictive power and took out the abyssal sword cauldron. "Including the ones I bought today, I already have 15 underworld pearls. I just don't know if I can transform another netherworld Tao pattern." As Lin Sun pondered, he casually took out an underworld pearl and crushed it. All of a sudden, wisps of dim yellow light fell into the abyssal sword cauldron like nectar. The dim yellow light rain was greedily absorbed by one of the netherworld Tao patterns and refined into netherworld energy. This netherworld Tao pattern also underwent some subtle changes. Previously, according to Cyan Sparrow, the underworld pearl had an incredible effect on refining treasures, which was why its value was ridiculously high in the eternal world. After Lin Sun tested it, he realized that the power contained in the underworld pearl also had an amazing effect on refining the 9 netherworld Tao patterns. Previously, when he went to purchase the underworld pearl, He planned to accumulate more and try to refine a complete Netherworld Dao in one go. Lin Sun had a feeling that the 9 Netherworld Dao patterns were not as simple as just imprinting a Dao on each of them. When he completely refined the 9 complete Dao patterns, it was highly possible that they would undergo a further transformation. In the middle of the night, Lin Sun crushed the underworld pearls one after another, and the power contained in them was absorbed by the Netherworld Dao patterns in the abyssal sword cauldron. The night was getting darker. Suddenly, Lin Sun's heart palpitated without any warning. The combat instinct that he had honed for many years made him dodge subconsciously. Soundlessly, a crack appeared on the ground beneath his feet, and a dull and lusterless sharp light suddenly flashed. The restrictive power that enveloped the room was easily torn apart, as if it did not exist. It turned into a rain of light and dissipated. The chair that Lin Sun had been sitting on also turned into powder and drifted away. P.S. Someone said that it was the last day of the month, so how could he not update? The goldfish thought for a while and could not refute that. Then he would continue to update tonight, but the third update would be a little late. Chapter 25-29. A series of scenes happened in an instant. It was incredibly fast. It was also extremely mysterious and fierce. If Lin hadn't dodged in time, he would have been hit. The room returned to silence. Lin Sun was surrounded by Taoist light, and his black eyes were terrifyingly cold. This was a folded space layer by layer. Each room was an independent space. In addition to the restriction power set by Lin Sun, the inn was also surrounded by the power of restriction. But the assassin could attack silently. It could be imagined that the origin of the assassin was extraordinary. Whoosh! Suddenly, Lin Sun waved his sleeves. There was only a ripple in the void, and then it returned to peace silently. Lin Sun could easily burn the mountains and boil the sea with the power of waving his sleeves. But now it seemed to be offset by some strange power. This made him frown. He quietly ran the mysterious Taoist light in his pupils and used the third eye. The scene in front of him suddenly changed. It was dark and silent. As if falling into the eternal night, he couldn't feel a trace of light at all. Interesting. I actually fell into the barrier of a secret realm without making a sound. Lin Sun looked around with a calm expression. This place isolated spiritual awareness, which meant that the perception was blocked, and the scene in front of him was very likely to be unreal. False and real, it was mysterious and unpredictable. The most frightening thing was that until now, Lin Sun hadn't noticed the trace of the assassin. Quietly, a ray of sharp light appeared and blended into the darkness. Its breath was restrained to the extreme, without a trace of power fluctuation. It suddenly stabbed at Lin Sun. Lin Sun bent his body, and the strange and silent light passed by his cheek and then disappeared silently. This dangerous scene was enough to make any Emperor Realm expert change his expression. From beginning to end, Lin Sun's expression didn't change, and he didn't even blink his eyes. He was as calm as water. And at the same time, with a clang, the abyssal sword cauldron suddenly shone brightly, and a Taoist sword swept out and pierced the void in front of him. The place that was originally dark and empty suddenly had a roar, and was shaken by the Taoist sword. Then, a figure suddenly flashed out. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lin Sun rushed forward and struck out with his palm. Rumble! The dark world produced a violent roar, and the void was like a turbulent sea. But the black figure was nowhere to be seen. Lin Sun couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and said, "It seems that you're not an ordinary person to be able to master such assassination skills." No one responded. Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep, and he stood still. He also seemed very calm and didn't panic at all. This was like a hidden battle, one in the light and the other in the dark. Both sides were searching for a flaw that would allow them to kill in a single strike, and it was very likely that the slightest bit of carelessness would determine life and death. It was the first time for Lin Sun to encounter such a strange and unpredictable assassination. However, he wasn't nervous at all. Since he'd started cultivating until now, he'd experienced countless battles of life and death, and he'd tempered an extremely terrifying combat instinct a long time ago. Even if his divine sense was obstructed and his perception was no longer there, just by relying on his combat instincts, he was not afraid of fighting this hidden assassin. Suddenly, Lin Sun's figure flashed. In the darkness beneath his feet, a sharp light suddenly appeared, and it vanished in a flash. It was mysterious and soundless. If it was any other Emperor Realm expert, they would have been killed countless times already. But Lin Sun seemed to be able to predict the future. Every time, he narrowly avoided it one step ahead of time, which was also incredible. And in the following time, this kind of strange assassination and attack continued to happen. Every time, it seemed to appear out of thin air, unpredictable and impossible to guard against. The power of this kind of assassination was also terrible. Once, Lin Sun struck horizontally with the abyssal Taoist sword. When it collided with the sharp light, the power generated was extremely amazing. This also made Lin Sun judge that the strength of this assassin was comparable to the level of Ninth Realm ancestors. However, what was more terrible than the Ninth Realm ancestors was the assassination skills mastered by this assassin, which was the most threatening. Unfortunately, Lin Sun was already familiar with this kind of secret battle, and he dodged more and more easily and calmly. Soon, the dark world fell into silence. The attack from the assassin didn't appear again. But Lin Sun frowned and had a hunch that the guy might have noticed that it was difficult to threaten him with this kind of surprise attack. But this guy didn't leave, obviously intending to use new means. Just as he thought of this, boom, an incomparably dazzling light suddenly appeared, and the dark world suddenly became a vast expanse of whiteness. The dazzling light was even brighter than the sun. Once people were used to the darkness, when a light suddenly appeared, they would feel extremely uncomfortable and even panic. What's more, the light that suddenly appeared at this moment was full of horrible killing intent. It was like a landslide, a tsunami, and the explosion of the sun. The light was as sharp as the light, all-pervasive. Bang, bang, bang. A series of dense and terrible collisions sounded. The bright light and shadow, like a torrent of sharp light pouring down, attacked Lin Sun from all directions. The abyssal sword cauldron buzzed and burst out sparks. In just a moment, Lin Sun suffered thousands of attacks, like a small boat in the raging sea. That scene was simply despairing. But at this moment, Lin Sun let out a long laugh. Caught you. After that, boom, his figure suddenly stretched out, like a big abyss waking up from silence, releasing a terrible power that could swallow the sky and the earth. The dazzling and sharp auras that came from all directions were completely crushed and devoured. At the same time, the abyssal sword cauldron had already rushed out and struck fiercely in the distance. Clang! In the earth-shaking collision, the abyssal sword cauldron was blocked by a long and slender black sword. The force between the two collided and spread, disturbing the world. Then, a thin figure staggered out of nothingness, dressed in a straw raincoat and a bamboo hat. The whole person was like a shadow, giving people a feeling of illusion. Puff! As soon as he appeared, he coughed up a mouthful of blood. Obviously, he was directly injured by this blow. Go! With a hoarse and low voice, he suddenly turned the black sword in his hand. Suddenly, a strange and dense Taoist pattern appeared on the black sword, burning fiercely and bursting out a terrible power, which dissolved the suppression of the abyssal sword cauldron. Whoosh! His figure flickered, and he was about to dive into the darkness of nothingness again. At this time, an ancient Taoist sword whistled out of the abyssal sword cauldron and chopped down with the power of splitting the sky and the earth. The sword edge was like the heaven-cutting blade. Crack! The thin figure tried his best to resist, but the black sword in his hand was directly cut into two pieces and splashed out. Damn it! The thin figure seemed to finally feel fear, but it was too late for him to dodge. The whole figure was instantly submerged by the vast sword intent. Boom! As if the heavens were falling and the earth was cracking, the black figure was directly crushed and dissipated in the boundless sword chi. After a while, everything calmed down. Lin Sun went forward, but found that in addition to the black sword that had been cut into two pieces, there was only a scorched crane feather left in the field. Holding the crane feather in his hand and looking at it for a moment, Lin Sun couldn't help frowning. Didn't he die? The darkness nearby fell and dissipated like peeling off a wall. After a burst of strange, distorted space ripples, Lin Sun's figure reappeared in his room. Only the broken wooden chair, the cracked ground, and the dissipating power of the prohibition proved that the mysterious assassination just happened was true. Lin Sun frowned and stared at the cracked ground for a moment. Then he flashed into it. Under the crack, there was a deep and winding path. As soon as Lin Sun's figure fell, he immediately felt a wave of residual power. It seemed that this guy didn't die completely, but he was seriously injured. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to leave his breath here with his hiding means. Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep, and he immediately followed the residual breath. Just for a moment, Lin Sun had come to the end of the underground path, where there was a gap leading to the surface. After rushing out, Lin Sun found that this was an inconspicuous courtyard, overgrown with weeds, which was obviously abandoned for a long time. Here, he could no longer catch the breath of the assassin. Someone should have met him here and taken him away as soon as he was injured. Lin Sun stood there, with his dark eyes terrifyingly cold. After a while, he returned to the inn along the original path. A crane feather. Is the assassin a crane-shaped divine bird? Lin Sun took out the crane feather again and sensed the breath imprinted in it with his divine awareness. Gloomy, cold, dark, sharp, cryptic. After a while, Lin Sun rubbed his fingertips, and the crane feather turned into ashes and scattered. After that, he took out the black sword that had been sliced into two and observed it carefully. He noticed that the sword was narrow, slender, and over a meter long. The edges on both sides of the sword were dim and lusterless, and the body of the sword was covered in dense and strange twisted Tao marking diagrams. "I know, this man is he." Suddenly, Cyan Sparrow said with surprise, "I didn't expect that when Xiaoheng was so cruel that he didn't hesitate to ask the top assassin of the Hidden Void World to deal with you." Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Hidden Void World? He? In the Eternal World, there are two mysterious assassin forces. One is the Hidden Void World. The other is the Cloud and Water World. The former is in charge of assassination, and the latter is in charge of killing. They are both mysterious forces that are immortal. Tracing back to their history, they are even older than some immortal emperor clans. Cyan Sparrow's voice was low, and she was a little absent-minded. No one knew the origin of these two mysterious forces, but they were definitely not ordinary assassin organizations, because the people they dealt with were above the Emperor realm. In the Eternal World, the mention of the Hidden Void World and the Water World was a terrible deterrent, and it made people dread and fear. After a while, Cyan Sparrow said, "If my guess is correct, the person who tried to assassinate you, is he from the Hidden Void World, a mysterious person who is ranked 6th among the Emperor Realm assassins in the Hidden Void World. In the past, countless Emperor Realm figures have been killed by him, and there are some extremely powerful 9th Realm ancestors among them. P.S. Tomorrow is the first day of the month, and I want to ask for a guaranteed monthly ticket in advance." Chapter 25:30. When he heard this, Lin Sun could not help but frown. Hidden Space World and Cloud Water were two forces of assassins who were famous in the Eternal World for their assassinations and killings. Their foundation could be traced back to ancient times, and they had assassinated countless emperors. Who would not be wary of such a mysterious force? Moreover, according to Cyan Sparrow, the people in these two forces have been immersed in killing ever since they stepped onto the path of cultivation. They were perverts who had grown up in mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Their assassination skills were unparalleled in the world. If they wanted to assassinate someone, it would be the same as giving that person a death sentence. A long time ago, because Cloud Water had repeatedly assassinated the important figures of the immortal emperor clans, they had incurred the wrath of the masses. Thus, a group of immortal emperor clans had attacked Cloud Water. It was an extremely bloody battle that lasted for many years. The assassins from Cloud Water had appeared and disappeared mysteriously, as if they were everywhere. They had carried out the most intense counterattack. That period of time could be said to have been dark and turbulent. No one knew how many powerful figures had died. In the end, after that battle, Cloudwater had been eradicated, but it had not been wiped out. It was said that some of its remaining forces had gone into hiding. But after that, there was rarely any news about Cloudwater. Many people had long since forgotten that dark and bloody period of time. Hidden Space World might be as famous as Cloudwater, but over the years, they rarely provoked the immortal Emperor clans. Thus, they did not cause any anger. But there was no doubt that the foundation of the Hidden Space World was not weaker than that of Cloudwater. Even the immortal Emperor clans would not easily provoke them. When Xiaoheng must have paid a great price to be able to get he to help. I have to say, even I am surprised that you managed to escape with your life. As Cyan Sparrow spoke, she looked at Lin Sun with a strange gaze. His existence was also famous in the Eternal World. How could anyone overlook an assassin who was ranked 6th in the Eternal World? But tonight, he had almost died at Lin Sun's hands. Surprised? He's just an assassin. His greatest strength is breath control and stealth. When I saw through all of this, he was only slightly stronger than a Realm 9 ancestor, Lin Sun said casually. Lin Sun said casually, but I can't let this matter go. Even if he works for money, even if he comes from the Hidden Void World, since he dares to assassinate me, he must pay the price. He spoke casually, but the meaning within his words caused Qing Ke to raise her eyebrows, and then she laughed with ridicule. Once you truly understand how terrifying the hidden space dimension is, perhaps you won't dare to speak such words. Lin Sun smiled and didn't bother to explain. But after experiencing this, Lin Sun became cautious. Crane's appearance proved that even in the undying Heaven Pass, it was impossible to be absolutely safe. He returned with his tail between his legs. I'm afraid when Xiaoheng will not let this matter rest. Are you planning to let it go just like that? Qing Ke asked. Of course not. Lin Sun said without hesitation. It's impolite not to reciprocate. Even if we can't catch the assassin, we should at least make Wen Xiaoheng pay for it. Then, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Since the other party dared to attack unscrupulously in the city, Lin Sun would not be subject to the rules of the city and swallow his anger. What do you plan to do? Green Sparrow asked excitedly. Wait for an opportunity. As Lin Sun said, he took out the abyssal sword cauldron again and continued to refine the 9 netherworld Dao patterns with the underworld pearl. It seemed that what happened just now didn't affect his state of mind at all. Green Sparrow couldn't help sighing inwardly. Lin Sun's state of mind was too strong and tenacious. If it were someone else who encountered such a sudden change, he would have been filled with anger and worry. But he actually had the leisure to refine weapons. This night was destined to not be peaceful. Tianyu Tower. When Xiaoheng stood leaning against the railing, holding a jade porcelain wine pot, looking very leisurely and comfortable. He liked the feeling of looking down at the world, having a panoramic view of the world, and seeing the appearance of all living beings, which made people involuntarily feel like a king descending to the world. Suddenly, there was a ripple in the void, and Granny Snow's figure emerged, her face extremely pale. Young master, he failed. Crack! The jade porcelain wine pot in Wen Xiaoheng's hand fell to the ground, splashing debris. He was stunned for a moment, as if he had misheard, and couldn't help asking, Failed? Granny Snow's face was ashen, and she said in a low voice, I just received news that he was seriously injured and was almost killed when Xiaoheng only felt his vision turning black, and his body swayed. His handsome face suddenly became ferocious, and his veins popped out, his chest heaving up and down with anger. My 3 million eternal void source crystals went down the drain, just like that? What the F***CK hidden void world can't even kill Ling Xuanzi. What a piece of trash. He clearly lost control of his emotions and flew into a rage, as if he was venting his anger. Young master, there's no doubt that he is powerful. The reason why we lost is probably because we still underestimated Ling Xuanzi. Granny Snow's expression was uncertain, and she said, However, The contact person from the hidden void world has already said that since he has accepted our mission, he will naturally give us a satisfactory explanation. But what? When Xiaoheng asked, they said that the previous reward was not enough, and if we want Ling Xuanzi to die, we have to pay another 2 million eternal void source crystals. The reason is that the information we provided about Ling Xuanzi was inaccurate, and it caused them to make a mistake during the assassination. As she finished speaking, Granny Snow's voice became softer, and she felt like there was a ball of fire in her chest that was about to explode. However, when Xiaoheng was stunned for a moment, and he was so angry that his lungs almost exploded. He was so angry that he laughed. What does the hidden void world think I am? A sucker that can be extorted at will? They've gone too far. After a long time, when Xiaoheng calmed down a little, and then he said with a gloomy face, "Tell the hidden void world that I won't give them a single 2 million eternal void source crystals. They can either kill Ling Xuanzi, or they can return my 3 million eternal void source crystals." As he finished speaking, he couldn't help but curse angrily. These bastards have failed their mission, yet they're still bargaining with me. They're simply insane. Granny Snow spoke with worry. "Young master, if it's not necessary, it's better not to offend the hidden void world. This power has existed until now, and its resources and reserves are even more terrifying than our own clan. Instead of making a fuss about this with them, why don't we spend some more money and allow them to continue dealing with Ling Xuanzi?" She paused for a moment and said hesitantly, "After all, even he was unable to kill Ling Xuanzi. At the very least, it's sufficient to prove that unless we ask Hung Tianxua, the ancestor of the Tao, to personally make a move, otherwise, we're probably utterly unable to do anything to him with our strength." When Xiaoheng was stunned, and an indescribable feeling of defeat arose spontaneously in his heart. As one of the 5 ultimate emperors of the Wen clan, he hadn't experienced such a feeling for a very long time. After a long time, he took a deep breath and said, "Tell the hidden void world that they'll be able to obtain another 2 million eternal void source crystals when they kill Ling Xuanzi." Granny Snow heaved a sigh of relief in her heart, and she received her orders and left. The assassin from the hidden void world lost? When he found out about this, Hung Tianxua, who was cultivating in meditation, couldn't help but be alarmed, and he felt extremely surprised. "My lord, this matter has been confirmed. Fortunately, no disturbances spread, and everything occurred and ended in secret." A boy spoke with a clear voice. Hung Tianxua grunted in acknowledgement and said, "When Xiaoheng might come later, so just ask him to come over." The boy was stunned, and then he received his orders and left. Sure enough, it wasn't long before when Xiaoheng arrived hastily, and he cupped his hands and said, "Uncle, I've disturbed you again." Hung Tianxua revealed a smile, and then he stood up and said, "Don't mention it. Quickly, have a seat." When Xiaoheng shook his head and said, "I've only come here to seek a clear answer from Uncle. What sort of price should I pay for Uncle to personally eliminate Ling Xuanzi?" Hung Tianxua's pupils narrowed, and he said after a short while, "What? Can't the members of the hidden void world do it?" The corners of Wen Xiaoheng's mouth twitched imperceptibly, and he said, "With Uncle's ability, I presume you already know the outcome of this assassination. Truthfully speaking, I'm truly disappointed in the hidden void world." Hung Tianxua shook his head and guided, "Nephew, you're wrong. I did know a little about He's Tao of assassination, and a peak 7th level Imperial Emperor like you is probably not a match for him. This doesn't prove that the hidden void world is useless, but Ling Xuanzi is very difficult to deal with." When Xiaoheng's heart shook and his expression changed slightly, Hung Tianxua smiled and continued, "Nephew, you should have deduced this as well, and that's why you personally came to ask me to make a move, right?" When Xiaoheng's expression flickered indeterminately, and he said in a low voice after a short while, "Uncle, please help me this once." Hung Tianxua thought for a moment and said, "The trial's secret realm will be opening in 3 months." When Xiaoheng was stunned, and then he seemed to have understood something and said, "Uncle, what do you mean?" Hung Tianxua smiled warmly. "What I mean is perhaps we can make Ling Xuanzi disappear forever. When Xiaoheng's eyes shone with a divine light, and his spirits were lifted as he said, "Uncle, you're saying that we should send this fellow to the trial's secret realm's 9th region." Heng Tianxua smiled and said nothing. When Xiaoheng seemed to have come to a complete understanding instead, and he said, "Ninth region. Ninth region. Why didn't I think that as long as Uncle agrees, you'll be able to obediently let those who are participating in the trials go to their deaths?" Heng Tianxua frowned and said, "Nephew, this is a trial, and only those who walk out of the trial's secret realm can continue on their journey to the eternal true world. How can it be called going to their deaths? Of course, since it's a trial, then casualties can't be avoided." When Xiaoheng cursed in his heart for being hypocritical, yet he smiled respectfully and said, "I'll have to trouble Uncle with this matter. In the future, I'll surely repay you generously." Heng Tianxua laughed heartily. "What generous repayment? I don't care about all that. When you're free, ask your father to come and meet this old friend of his." When Xiaoheng was stunned, and his smile was slightly forced, yet he still nodded. How could he not understand that in Heng Tianxua's eyes, when Xiaoheng's repayment was utterly unimportant? What Heng Tianxua truly wanted was repayment from his father, the current patriarch of the One Clan. This old geezer is too cunning and greedy. When he left the city governor's estate, when Xiaoheng cursed in his heart once more. But what he could do was that he had no choice but to agree. Enmity had already been formed. He could only fight to the death.